And right now we are watching a large disturbance in the eastern Atlantic. For any signs of tropical development, we want to get over to our hurricane specialist, Brian Norcross, right now to hear more about that.
Hi, Christy and Calvin. Yes, we're watching this huge disturbance out there. Actually, take a look at it on the satellite picture here and compare the size of this circulation to the size of like all the Eastern Caribbean islands. I mean, this is a monstrous thing. And also, I want you to notice up to the north here, these clouds. These are kind of low clouds caused by all the Saharan dust across that part of the Atlantic. So that's really affecting this system here. There you see kind of close up, it's a big old circulation, but what it has to have is it has to have a small center where everything kind of congeals around a center if it's going to actually develop into a tropical depression or tropical storm. And it's iffy because of all that dry air. Now, the National Hurricane Center is still giving it an 80% chance, but there's so much dry air out there, I wouldn't be surprised to see this come down. We'll see what they do with the update coming up at 8 p.m. tonight. So here's the deal. There's a lot on this map, but the main thing to look at is look at all the dust out there. So on the models, you have kind of two clusters. One that kind of goes up to the north over here, east of the Bahamas, and then the European model, if you remember from last year, we talked about this a lot, is not, we don't get a line for that. So we're simulating that with the X's. So the European model is a weak system going through the Caribbean. Point is, very uncertain because we don't even know what kind of development is going to happen back here. So we have time to watch it, but nothing can get too strong with all that dust out there. There's a little gap in the high pressure here, and that's what would turn the system north if it is strong enough and gets far enough north. But there's just a lot of ifs and maybes going on until this thing actually can consolidate, if indeed it ever does. All right, back to you guys.
You know, Dr. Knabb, we've talked about this. Is this something that's a trend, something that should be concerning to people at home, to you even?
I think it is concerning because, you know, it is hard to get 8 named storms to form before August. Yeah. And I think a big reason for this is how warm the waters are in the entire Atlantic basin, and they are above average throughout the basin here. So I think that is one reason for the 8 storms, lack of El Nino, and it is combined. All of this gives us concern for what the true peak months of the season, August, September, October, could be like. Now, there is some good news here. We aren't setting records like we are with named storms with hurricanes. If you look at when was the earliest first hurricane, you know, Hannah's our first hurricane of the Atlantic season. The record for that is early January, and the record second Atlantic hurricane is May 28th, and the record third hurricane is on June 28th. So we're not setting records for numbers of hurricanes. That's a good thing, but that is not to say that we couldn't catch up, right? And in terms of major hurricanes, haven't had any of those yet. The earliest Cat 3 on record is June the 8th, and we've had 3 of them by August 6th to August 17th before. So, you know, we're ahead of the game on named storms, no doubt, but we're not ahead of the game on hurricanes and major hurricanes. But that doesn't mean we couldn't catch up, because in 1969, there were no hurricanes at all by this date, and we ended up with 12 hurricanes, which is the second most on record. 2004, no hurricanes until August. Then we had 9 of them, and we had the 4 landfalls in the U.S. But 2005 takes the cake, Alex. It has all the records for the earliest Cat 4s and Cat 5s, even prior to this date.
And in some other news here tonight, we are tracking the tropics.
There's one system in the Atlantic that we will be keeping a close eye on. Chief Meteorologist Phil Farrow here with this now. Phil?
Hi, first of all, I would like to give my condolences to the Anson family. Ed will be missed. Let's take a look at the tropics, because far away from South Florida, over 2,200 miles away, is an area of low pressure holding its own tonight. More thunderstorms are developing, and this will continue to move to the west. The National Hurricane Center giving it an 80% chance that it could develop into a depression or a tropical storm in the area highlighted in red over the next 5 days. Now, as we take a look at where it might head, just a reminder, since nothing has formed, The models are basically just giving us an educated guess. It looks like it will travel to the northwest and then make a turn here across the western Atlantic, but it is way too early to tell where the system will go. This tropical depression or storm, even if it doesn't develop, will dump a lot of rain across the islands, anywhere between an inch to about 2.5 inches of rain over the next few days. And then as far as Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic and Haiti is concerned, check out Puerto Rico, almost 4 inches or better by the time Friday rolls around with some gusty winds. We'll have a lot more on this a little bit later on in weather.
There's that area of higher pressure. Notice the spin in the winds. This will build into Florida as we head into the next several days. Plus, we'll have some Saharan dust around. So rain chances will be on the lower side, but doesn't mean we're completely rain-free. We will have some showers and storms around. Some of them could be on the stronger side. That's what tends to happen when you get the Saharan dust. It helps to increase the updrafts, if you will, with the thunderstorms. This is a tropical wave that we're watching, very disorganized. So far, no center of circulation, but the hurricane hunters will go out and investigate as we head into the afternoon hours. Ahead of this system, though, we do have a lot of warm water and also favorable winds, so there is a high chance that it does become a tropical depression or a tropical storm as we head into the next few days. And the computer models do take it towards the Leeward Islands, Puerto Rico, and then eventually just north of Hispaniola and Cuba. And you can see it's in our general region as we head towards this upcoming weekend, right around Sunday into Monday. And depending on the exact track means obviously what we will see. We could get some rain and some wind out of it for sure, but some models do curve it out over here away from South Florida. Some bring it towards the Gulf Coast, so still a lot of uncertainty in the long term, but something, of course, that we'll continue to monitor as we head towards this weekend and early next week.
Thank you for that update. Also this midday, we are tracking the tropics. Joining us now, First Alert meteorologist Angie Lassman with a look at how it's looking out there with the tropics. Hey, Angie.
Hey there, Roxy. Yeah, you know, we were telling you about Invest 92L, which was basically a broad area of low pressure that the National Hurricane Center was investigating over the past couple of days for potential development. Now, in order to start issuing advisories, watches, warnings, things like that, all those tropical products, they have called it Potential Tropical Cyclone 9. So we do have some information. An Air Force, an aircraft is headed into that system later this afternoon to get a better understanding. But right now, 90% chance of development. Models take it close to Puerto Rico. So here is the current details on this. Potential Tropical Cyclone 9, winds at 40 miles per hour, currently moving west at 23 miles per hour. And you can see that latest track does take it again close to the Lesser Antilles here in the coming days. So it does look like it gains some steam. Right now 40 miles per hour, but eventually becoming a 60 mile per hour system as it nears Hispaniola and Cuba. This will be something to watch. There are watches and warnings in effect. Coming up in just a few minutes, I'll show you where some of those are located and what this could mean for South Florida here in the coming days. That's coming up in just a bit. Guys, back over to you.
Well, thanks so much for being with us here for Weather Center Live. And don't forget to join us for the Mission to Mars launch. That's going to be on Thursday. Live coverage kicking off at 6 a.m. Eastern.
And at 40 after today, we're going to be breaking down the Red Planet weather history with some interesting facts. But first, Alex, potential tropical cyclone 9 has formed in the Atlantic, and nearly 40 million people live within that 5-day cone.
Yeah, you said it. A lot of folks certainly going to be paying attention to this here as we head on through the coming days. For now, the immediate future, it's working its way through the islands. That's going to be the first impact being felt with the gusty winds as well as some of the heavy downpours here for us. So here we have it. Again, potential tropical cyclone 9, and essentially the National Hurricane Center deems it that because they want to begin to issue those alerts, those advisories here before it's too late. And so that's what they're doing here before it even becomes a tropical depression or a storm. They want to issue some of those warnings. Not the most organized system, but it's trying to get there here. Certainly compared to yesterday where we didn't have even much in the way of shower and thunderstorm activity, we are certainly seeing a little bit more of that, more convection showing up with this system as it's moving westbound. Fairly decent pace here at 23 miles per hour. So before we blink our eyes, we'll be talking about some of those downpours and the gusty winds. We can actually show you where this thing may be headed over time, thanks to a big high towards the north. That's our Bermuda high. That's what's going to help to steer it on off towards the west-northwest in the coming days as we follow this thing heading into the latter part of the week, potentially having an impact here on parts of Puerto Rico. Rico, the Virgin Islands, maybe even around the Dominican Republic, the island of Hispaniola here in time here. But the track still very uncertain. More southerly track here would take it here and interact with more landmass, and that would certainly disrupt this thing from really getting better organized. We'll keep an eye on that. A more northerly track keeps it away from some of those islands, but potentially the Bahamas, and then down the road, maybe off the southeast coast. Which one of those two tracks does it take? Somewhere in between, outside of those two tracks? Certainly all a possibility right now, all very, very uncertain. So the key with this is to make sure you're keeping an update, checking back for those updates. But for now, here's what the National Hurricane Center is thinking, moving on off towards the west-northwest and noticing here down the road, now we still have some time, but down the road, we have a good chunk of the peninsula of Florida within that cone here. But certainly want to drive home the point that right now, this thing hasn't even formed yet. So where will it form? How strong could it be? All things yet to be determined. A lot of uncertainty when it comes to this thing. But for now, certainly certain that we'll find ourselves dealing with some of that rain coming on through the islands. And eventually, as we work our way on into Wednesday, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, there you have the Dominican Republic that potentially could be dealing with this. That's according to the European model there. The hurricane hunters getting out and trying to fly this thing en route now. And then as we work our way through this evening, another flight. And then tomorrow morning, they'll be out there as well to get a better fix on how this thing is trying to organize a bit more. Chris?
Well, a tropical storm warning has been issued for all of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We're taking you live right now to San Juan, Puerto Rico. Of course, not a bad afternoon. Pretty sunny and temperatures about 88 degrees, but with the humidity, heat indices are above 100 degrees. We could use some rain, and this will be beneficial as we are running behind when it comes to rainfall. So the welcome wet weather will be needed. However, the winds and the damaging side of things, not so much. Now, more than 780,000 homes are currently in the process of sustaining damage after Hurricane Maria back in 2017. A lot of them live in roofless homes covered by tarps. And now reports say the island's first major rebuilding program, which was federally funded, hasn't resulted in one single completed home yet.
As part of the recovery process, we acknowledge that these funds could be the option for thousands of families that 3 years after the disasters are still awaiting repairs and dignified and secure housing. Nonetheless, 3 years after Hurricane Maria and Irma hit Puerto Rico and 1 year after the application process was open, we don't have a single house that has been repaired using these funds.
And Puerto Rican officials have vouched to speed up the reconstruction process of hurricane-damaged homes and say work is almost finished on the first 45 homes to benefit from the program.
Hello and good afternoon, everybody. The system closing in on the islands at this hour.
Let's get right to it. Chief Meteorologist Phil Farrell live in the Weather Center with details.
And good afternoon, everyone. Here's the very latest on this system. Right now, a recon mission is ongoing. They're trying to find exactly where the center is located. It is very disorganized. However, it still has a chance to become Tropical Storm Isaias, and it could be a major rainstorm for the islands. Now, it is very far away from South Florida, just under 2,000 miles away, and it is moving rather quickly to the west. Here is the name here, potential storm. What does it mean? Well, it's a system that's really not fully developed. The National Hurricane Center uses this designation to issue watches and warnings much earlier than they would otherwise. This allows people down the road to make sure they can prepare for whatever comes their way. 23-mile-per-hour winds, or speed, I should say, is what it's moving at right now. It is very, very disorganized and elongated. The National Hurricane Center says it'll probably move to the northwest, all based on the models. So high pressure will continue to push it that way, and it'll probably make a big turn somewhere as it nears the Bahamas and Florida sometime over the weekend. The close-up cone shows the system possibly becoming Tropical Storm Isaias on Tuesday night, possibly Wednesday morning. Tropical storm warnings are in place already for the Leeward Islands. Also, tropical storm warnings for the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, and a tropical storm watch for the north coast of the Dominican Republic. And after that, that center of circulation could be anywhere in this area highlighted come Saturday and Sunday. Now, if it does travel over the Dominican Republic, it's going to run into the Pico Duarte. This is the highest peak in all the Caribbean, over 10,000 feet high, and that could shred the system to pieces. Unfortunately, it could also dump a lot of rain there. And speaking of rain, here's it, the downpours are moving in across the Windward Islands, already at parts of St. Lucia, getting some heavy rainfall. Tropical system, as it moves into the Caribbean, will dump a lot of rain. That'll be the main issue there. Anywhere between 1 to 3 inches of rain across the Lesser Antilles through Thursday. But take a look once the system moves in through Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and Haiti, especially San Juan, better than 5.5 inches of rain. That surely will lead to some flooding concerns. A couple of things can happen here. If the center of circulation is actually found further south, then the system will track into the Caribbean Sea. It'll run into some very strong upper level winds, and that'll shear it apart completely. That'll be the end of that. However, if the center of circulation develops a little further north, then the system will track across the islands with some gusty winds and heavy rain, and everyone down the road will have to keep watching it very carefully. So the key right now is trying to find where that center of circulation is located. A recon plane is desperately trying to find it. Top winds have been around 39 miles per hour. Once they find that center, it'll give us a better idea as to where this system will end up. We'll have a lot more on this a little bit later on in weather.
And in this record active 2020 hurricane season, yet another system is threatening. Here's South Florida's Chief Meteorologist John Morales with more on how this could impact the Caribbean and if we should be worried here in South Florida. John, it seems like it's too soon.
Yeah, I mean, we just don't know much about this system in terms of, well, I mean, it hasn't even formed yet, Jackie. I mean, it is still, at this hour, a potential tropical cyclone, but it's technically just a tropical wave as it stands right now. Take a look at the satellite picture. You can see, yeah, a broad area of mainly disorganized clouds. Now, clearly, you can see some thunderstorm activity there trying to kind of blow up, grow near the Lesser Antilles as it's approaching. But just at 11 p.m., just now, National Hurricane Center indicating that this disturbance has not become any better organized since the last advisory, which was 6 hours ago. So for now, a tropical wave entering the Caribbean. It's called a potential tropical cyclone. Why? Because they want to make sure that all the populations that are going to be affected by this are ready. So this allows the National Hurricane Center to issue warnings and watches, and there are warnings and watches in effect for a good portion of the Antilles, all the way into Puerto Rico and even parts of the Dominican Republic. Now, this wave slash future tropical storm should move towards the west-northwest, guided by high pressure. This is the forecast tonight from the National Hurricane Center, shifted a little bit to the south and to the west. It still shows a Florida landfall, but Jackie, just like I told you earlier today, you just can't take this track as one that has a good level of certainty. So we'll have to wait and see.
That's right. We are tracking the tropics, and I've got your local forecast. Here's what's going on in the Caribbean, my friends. If you didn't hear me talk about it the last few days, well, now you're going to hear me lecture you for the next few days. Currently, we are tracking potential tropical cyclone 9 in the southeastern half of the Caribbean, and a very elongated area of low pressure. Look at all the moisture associated with this system right now, bringing some tropical downpours for the Windward Islands and the Leeward Islands as it's moving west-northwest at 23 miles per hour. 5 a.m. advisory of winds of 45 miles per hour. You can see the forecast path has it moving west-northwest. So we're going to follow this forecast cone. Couple things I do want you to know before we do that. I am watching right now Hurricane Hunter aircraft about to get out there, so I'm going to break down that and bring you that graphic. But the big thing we're noting is that we have not found a defined center of circulation with the system. So we're going off of infrared imagery and we're going off of buoy data. So the forecast path of uncertainty continues until we find that actual center of circulation, also the intensity. So with that said, models have it moving west-northwest. You can see the state of Florida is highlighted in the cone of concern as we get into the weekend. But the imminent threat currently is the tropical downpours, the flash flooding, and the gusty winds for the island chain. There's a tropical storm watch for the southeastern half of the Bahamas, tropical storm warning for parts of the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Leeward Islands, and Windward Islands currently as they're dealing with the worst of the system. Models have it moving west-northwest, pretty much in agreement as it moves towards Hispaniola, and then they diverge out once it gets past Cuba. That's why we need to watch the system. A couple scenarios. This is the GFS model. Has the system moving over the Lesser Antilles towards the Dominican Republic, staying just offshore, which would keep the system a bit stronger and just off our east coast. Now the European model has it moving west-northwest, interacting with Hispaniola, keeping the system more south of us, and that's something we'll continue to watch too. So lots of questions, not too many answers quite yet. We're just getting you prepared. I'll prepare you for your Wednesday forecast coming up in just a bit.
All right, here's an update on our tropical system. Still not a tropical storm. It's still called a potential tropical cyclone number 9, and working through the Caribbean. Why do they call it that? Hurricane Center decided to use that terminology a few years ago, and it's for a system they expect to develop into a tropical storm. It hasn't happened yet. It's been several days, still keeping an eye on it. It may not happen at 11 o'clock tonight, but there is definitely a flare-up convection near what will likely become the center if that does develop, and it's a little over 1,000 miles away from our coastline, and of course getting a little closer to us, but still very disorganized. A lot of dry air in this, and some of the strongest winds, at least earlier in the day, are nowhere near what is trying to become the center. But part of the issue here is that it's elongated. They're almost like a double barrel low here with several little swirls trying to develop and coalesce into one area of low pressure. It may do it in time. There's a look at the track. This is the 5 p.m. advisory, or the 5 p.m. track, the 8 p.m. advisory, moving west-northwest at 18. I insist on bringing this more northwest. It hasn't happened yet. Continues on more of a west track, but we'll see at 11 o'clock. This is the official forecast, though. There's Friday 2 a.m. That's assuming that it makes it off the north coast of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, an area that's historically has been very unfavorable for tropical storms and hurricanes to continue through. There's Saturday 2 a.m. As we get into Saturday afternoon, 50-mile-an-hour winds, and then the entire state, the peninsula anyway, becomes in the air cone through Sunday and into Monday. It eventually works its way up in toward Georgia and the Carolinas. The forecast tracks, some of them shifting even a little farther east. The Euro model, the 18Z model, bringing it in along southeast Florida on the weekend. And so we're going to have to watch this one closely. There are watches in the central Bahamas now, and we have about a 20 to 40% chance of tropical storm winds on the weekend. At this point, here's what we're looking at. Sunny and hot weather for Friday, rain squalls, some of the outer bands Saturday, and rainy, squally weather for Sunday, too, with potential for tropical storm force winds. And we'll more on this coming up in 30 seconds.
Live, the news on NBC 6 at 11 starts now.
Off the top, in the tropics, one of the longest waits for a storm to be baptized finally ended this evening when Isaias was named south of Puerto Rico. Rain and wind were affecting the island as well as Hispaniola tonight. And here in South Florida, it seems people are taking early precautions. Video from a Walmart in Pembroke Pines shows shoppers stocking up on essentials like water. And so it begins. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jackie Nesbral.
It sure does. Good evening. I'm Juwan Strader. We all want to know whether the storm is going to hit here, too. South Florida's Chief Meteorologist John Morales may know the answer to that all-important question. So, John, is it still too soon to know yet?
Yeah, Jawan, it still is too soon to know. And I'll tell you why. Even though it's finally been baptized, after all this time, took a day and a half, by the way, for this to happen. Well, we are just now learning where this actual center of circulation is. And we learned not through Hurricane Hunter aircraft, but through a satellite that remotely measured the winds from space and was finally able to pinpoint where that center of circulation was, basically about 150 miles to the south of Puerto Rico. Now, as you look at the satellite loop, you're going to notice still a pretty ragged system, a system that is struggling. Nevertheless, with that center now defined, it should move towards the west-northwest and into the island of Hispaniola. And that is very relevant because if it moves into Hispaniola with those 10,000-foot mountains, and this not being a mature system yet, there's a chance it's going to really struggle to survive afterwards. For the time being, 50-mile-an-hour winds on Tropical Storm Isaias being guided towards the west-northwest by high pressure in the Atlantic, which is expected to weaken down the road, and that might open up a chance for it to turn to the east a little bit earlier. You can see there's been a shift to the right on this forecast track, again by the National Hurricane Center. Center. And you're going to see these shifts, Juwan and Jackie, until we finally get a good handle on the forecast. And I think that will come tomorrow. I think we'll have much better answers for you tomorrow regarding this system. Back to you.
All right, John, thank you. And as a precaution, all state-supported testing sites in Florida will temporarily close beginning tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock. Now, that includes sites like Hard Rock Stadium and the Fort Lauderdale War Memorial. The sites will remain closed until they are safe to reopen. However, state officials expect the sites to reopen a week from today at the latest. While the state-run sites are closed, anyone who needs a test is asked to contact your county health department.
And thanks for joining us here at Weather Nation. We are tracking Tropical Storm Isaias. Here's a view out of Puerto Rico on Wednesday. Those very strong winds gusting through and potentially some more tropical storm force winds could be incoming in towards the eastern Caribbean. I'm meteorologist Elena Cameron. We'll have more details on ongoing severe weather threat with meteorologist Matt Monroe in just a few minutes here. But let's get to the tropics. We've got tropical storm. It has finally been named Isaias. You can see it's still fairly disorganized, but enough from the National Hurricane Center to go ahead and name this storm. Those winds are going to continue gusting here. As you can see, a lot more of that infrared imagery as it continues to move over some of those islands like Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. You'll start to see some of that heavier rain moving through as well. Our tropical storm warnings have been also added to areas like the Bahamas. We also have further tropical storm watches a little bit further in the Bahamas as well. So everyone that's in orange, you're under a tropical storm warning. So tropical storm force winds are imminent, and then if you're under that watch, be watching out for that for the next couple of days. So heavy rain and flooding, that's going to be a main threat with this, as well as some of those very strong wind gusts as well. And again, those watches and warnings extending through the Bahamas. As we get towards the rest of your forecast, you can see tropical storm Isaias is likely going to continue to track northbound and could potentially be bringing some impacts to areas of southern Florida as early as late Saturday and into Sunday as well. We'll have more updates on that. We do have Saharan dust that we'll be watching out for here, as it could inhibit further strengthening. Also, as it continues to move across land, that could also inhibit that further strengthening of this tropical system moving through. So that's what that forecast Saharan dust is. Most of it's north of the system, but if it does run into any of that, that could really further that development. Still likely going to be getting heavy rain regardless in the eastern Caribbean, all the way up and towards areas of southern Florida as well. So that's where we're watching here in the tropics, and we'll continue to keep an eye on that. In terms of what our models are looking at, well, they're in okay agreement until they get closer to Florida here. Then it becomes a little bit more widespread, and whether or not it's going to move along the western shore or the eastern shore, that's what we're going to be having to keep a close eye out on for us for the days to come.
Now to the tropics, we're keeping a close eye on Isaias. This is video of some of the windy conditions that St. Thomas got yesterday. Right now, tropical storm warnings are up for the U.S. Virgin Islands and the entire island of Puerto Rico. And Sandra, you're watching it very closely for us.
You know it. And I just want to, if you're just joining us, show you the track. It is about 100 miles to the south of Ponce, Puerto Rico now, with the core south of the island, but the outer bands really lashing out at places like San Juan. They're flash flood warnings right now. Later this afternoon, it's between Haiti and the Dominican Republic over Hispaniola. Then it heads tomorrow into the southern Bahamas. Saturday, just east of us, as a strong tropical storm with 70-mile-an-hour winds. East of us, though, is a really good thing, because when we talk about tropical systems, that right northeast quadrant is the worst. Most of the counterclockwise circulation puts the strong bands east of us. With that said, we'll see some beach erosion, some squally downpours possibly. It just depends how far east it goes, or if it gets pushed back to the west. So a lot to consider. I will tell you, it's racing now to the northwest at 21 miles an hour and is maintaining 60-mile-an-hour wind strength. This is what Puerto Rico looks like now. It is just inundated with some heavy, strong winds and very, very intense rains right now.
All eyes on Tropical Storm Isaias in the Caribbean as it eyes the U.S. mainland. But the updated cone has taken a turn, bringing more of the East Coast into play, and Florida is still in its sights. Got a lot going on right now with all the rain and, of course, watching that cone and it changes very carefully this morning. Jen and Jim with you. Steph has been live for us at Kennedy Space Center for the launch of the Mars rover. We'll join her again in just a moment. But right now, let's get into what's happening with our tropical storm. Isaias is bringing the rain and the flooding rain at that to portions of Puerto Rico. The winds have been gusty as well. Ominous skies. We've got all of it right here. As you can see, some parts of the island have reported wind gusts of almost 60 miles per hour. And then let's go to the Virgin Islands. Clouds are looming here into St. Croix. We've got some heavy rain as well through the day today. That could cause life-threatening flash flooding. The National Weather Service in San Juan is warning people that these conditions could prompt evacuations and rescues. You can just see how dark the sky looks, the low visibility, right? The showers, the thunderstorms, Jim, we're going to be in and out of the squalls throughout the day today. Let's talk more, though, about what the hurricane hunters are finding right now, because it looks like the center is just south of the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way. That was their position at 8 a.m. that they came in with, about 125 miles to the west of Ponce in Puerto Rico. And it's really interesting when you look at the satellite this morning. So I put an arrow here where we've actually got the center from the 8 a.m. and there it is, as Jen mentioned, just to the southwest tip of the Dominican. But if you'll notice, around that is where the deepest convection is. So as the center moves northwest, does this main part that's pretty well developed at this point just kind of pivot around the Dominican and miss the higher terrain there? That's a really interesting question and something to think about, certainly, because like I said this morning in a tweet, I don't think we know how certain the interactions with the Dominican are going to be, if at all. So that may, of course, certainly hinder the development if it's a big interaction and not hinder it much at all. So this thing will be free to move over warmer waters as it continues to move northwest over islands that are very shallow. They don't have the big topography issues, obviously, in the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas like we do in Puerto Rico and also into Hispaniola. But you can see, you know, it's kind of the broad circulation here showing up in the wind field. Some of the strongest winds are under these bands on the eastern side of the island right now. We've had gusts 50, 60 miles per hour in a lot of these, and that's where the hurricane sits right now at 60 miles per hour. So you can see some of the flash flood warnings that we have. Again, we're on the eastern side of the island and through here, not quite toward Vieques, but really on the eastern side of the island. Just about everybody's in this, including San Juan, as well as we've had some locally heavy rain here. As I mentioned, measured amounts in a lot of these flood warnings, 3 to 6 inches and counting. Still very heavy rain, and we will spend the next several hours in this as well. So we literally are going to bust out of this drought in a big way, and unfortunately a bad way, as flooding may ensue in a lot of these areas, unfortunately. Look at the rainfall just the past 2 days. You go up to the scale, 5 to 8 inches over a huge chunk. And remember, you've got topography here that goes east-west across the island. So that's with a southerly fetch, with a storm going to the west, you're just enhancing the rainfall, especially on the south side. So the whole island, Vieques, the U.S. Virgin Islands, under a flash flood watch, as you could imagine. So the broad center, as it's modeled here by the European, where the center is actually about here, will continue to track toward the west. But here's what I was talking about. This whole piece, which is a little bit more defined, kind of pivots around this. So does it get influenced at all by the Dominican Republic? Either way, it's heading west-northwest, Jen, and it looks like, regardless of impact, you have something that will strengthen into the Turks and Caicos and Bahamas in time.
Right. Once it gets beyond there, I mean, there's nothing really to stop it at that point, because in terms of strengthening, there's some wind shear and some other things, but we have warmer waters and we don't have land. And so those are, you know, we have the islands, and they won't disrupt the circulation. Let's talk about the steering. So right now, the main influence has been this big high pressure over the Atlantic here, the common steering flow that we see over the Atlantic waters. As we get into the next 2 days, we do have a trough that's building down across the eastern U.S. So how quickly and how strong is that trough is going to be an important part of this. Also, you know, we're going to be watching, I think, the strength of the system to determine what influences it more. If it's a weaker system, the big trough as well as the high pressure won't have as much, I think, as an impact. A stronger system is stronger and taller clouds. And so that gets picked up by sort of these big steering flows a little easier. So let's look at the chance of tropical storm force winds based on what we know about the track right now. There is a chance. You get up into this yellow, it's a 30 to 40% chance. Right here along the southeast coast of Florida, you have that risk of tropical storm force winds. The timing is as we get into the weekend. It would start on Saturday throughout the afternoon, evening, and then overnight, that risk of those tropical storm force winds spreading up along the southeast coast. And by the way, by Sunday evening and Monday morning, we are looking at that potential in the Carolinas. So heads up along the southeast coast. This is your time to prepare and make sure that you have a plan for what you would need to do in terms of supplies, and also what if you had to evacuate. These are good things to think about right now. We'll keep tracking Isaias as we continue here on AMHQ, taking a live look at San Juan.
All right, let's take a look at what's going on here. Now, we're very fortunate we have a radar image out of Puerto Rico, so you can see a good image here of what's going on around Puerto Rico, and you can see the showers and thunderstorms thanks to Tropical Storm Isaias, which is now working its way over toward Hispaniola, and you can even see the bands of rain here moving into the eastern parts of Hispaniola. So we're going to watch this carefully today and see how much of this storm actually moves over Hispaniola, because that will either weaken the storm, or if it manages to slip through the gap here, at least the center of the storm, it might not see too much weakening as it begins to move more northwesterly. Here's another look at it with the cloud cover and the infrared satellite picture there, and you can see it's a pretty broad circulation. It's rather large. Here's a look at the 8 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center. We're looking at winds at 60 miles per hour. It's moving northwest at 20 miles per hour. It is expected to move over Hispaniola, or at least close to it today, weakening a little bit, but then re-strengthening as it moves over the Bahamas. So here's 2 a.m. on Saturday morning, and it approaches South Florida, either moving in along the coast over toward the west coast of Florida, or staying well to the east. And there's a lot of big differences here depending on where it ends up, because this cone is so wide. If it ends up all the way over here on the west side, or right in the middle here, that could mean a pretty stormy weekend for us with a lot of wind and some heavy rainfall. Tropical storm force winds would be possible. If it ends up all the way over here on the eastern side of the cone, well, it's going to be pretty far away from us, and we could end up seeing a pretty nice weekend if that happens. So we're going to know a lot more about where this is headed after it clears Hispaniola later on today and starts to move more to the northwest without a whole lot in its way other than the small islands of the Bahamas. So the computer models still split quite a bit, with a lot of the models over here and some over here, and that's why the cone is so wide as it gets over top of Florida. We're going to watch this whole forecast very carefully. We could begin to see tropical storm force winds, if it is going to come closer to the coast or over South Florida, as early as Saturday morning, which is why we could see a tropical storm watch issued for our area later on this morning or early this afternoon.
Thanks, Alex. And of course, Dr. Postel mentioned it earlier. This is a storm that we're going to have to really keep a close eye on, because there are a lot of different variables that are going to impact exactly where this tracks and exactly how strong it ends up being. So the latest update, 60-mile-per-hour winds. This is a strong tropical storm, still moving very quickly northwest at 20 miles per hour. Center located somewhere around here south of the Mona Passage. So this is a very northerly loaded storm. It's a very lopsided storm right now. Tropical storm warnings in effect for Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, stretching up into Turks and Caicos and portions of the Bahamas. Currently a tropical storm watch as you head up toward Grand Bahama, though. So likely to continue seeing those spreading to the north and west as we head through the day today, and Isaias continues to move. We talked about all the rain that has already fallen, and that is resulting in some flash flood warnings across Puerto Rico. Several flash flood warnings for each coast, the west coast and the east coast. You can see the Lajas County, Sabana Grande County there under that flash flood warning this morning. Several inches of rain has already fallen, and we're not seeing that let up. We're continuing to see waves of rain moving into Caguas and Humacao. So definitely seeing a lot of places dealing with this flooding. San Juan, you're also included in that flash flood warning as of this morning. We've got Trujillo Alto included. So the point of all of that is there is flash flooding ongoing across Puerto Rico, and that of course could lead to maybe some mudslide issues and some dangerous conditions, as we've already seen some electrical problems, some power down issues. So flash flood watch also in effect for Puerto Rico and the Vieques, Virgin Islands, still included in that through tomorrow morning, as we're still going to have some of that rain feeding in, those bands feeding in from Isaias as we head through tonight and into tomorrow. So Dr. Postel, you know, there's a lot that we have to keep an eye on here with this particular system, and you mentioned it, interaction with land, shear, where it ends up tracking, lots of different things that are going to play out as we continue with Isaias.
Yeah, Felicia, those are all good points, and it seems like the internal structure is not super well organized right now. It's trying to get there, but there's some competing factors overall that suggest that Isaias is kind of still in its formative stages. If we could change that graphic and we could get to max 48, that would be great. That's the machine that I'm on, and we can show the graphics. There we are. This is what it looks like on the satellite picture right now. Fairly impressive thunderstorm distribution around sort of a broadly circulating area of low pressure. The winds, probably one of the more important factors factors or aspects of it right now is how big this system is in terms of the wind field. I mean, there are 30 to 35 mile per hour winds extending over hundreds of miles. So that goes to the fact that when we think ahead, think about how big this system is or could potentially be, and recognize that the impacts may extend yet again well outside the cone. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But let's have a look at the structure of it right now. You can see lots of rain, as Felicia was talking about, over Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. And your eye indeed may be turned to an area there, no pun intended, with a circulation, a pretty well-defined circulation aloft, at least one of probably several, well north of the region where the primary low-level center is being tracked by the Hurricane Reconnaissance. Air Force Recon in here finding a primary area, at least one of them, an area of low pressure here with 1,005 millibars on the pressure. But there's a lot of swirling going around here aloft. And the question is, will an area of low pressure develop underneath this upper level low, or will this one remain sort of the primary circulation down low? We just don't know yet, but for now it appears to be uncoupled, with mid-levels, say 15,000 and above, doing one thing and the surface doing another. When you have that sort of separation, this system is in not a hurry to strengthen. But that doesn't matter because the impacts are going to be spread far and wide for now. Look at this. Tropical storm force winds in excess of 39 miles per hour extending over hundreds of miles, well outside of where the bad weather is. Think about it. There's a large area of tropical storm force winds where there's hardly any cloud cover at all. This is a very large tropical wave originally, so it's got that large DNA factor leading into it. It's a very, very big system in that sense. Let's talk about now where it's going. Right now, there is a break in the ridge, right? There's a big old ridge, a dome of high pressure aloft, a fairly big one that we knew was going to be in place at this time days ago. It is giving you a trap door this way toward the north eventually. So it does appear likely that that is roughly where Isaias is going to go. The track models do suggest that right around the western edge of that subtropical high. That's where this thing is ultimately going to go. At least that's where we think it is right now. Got to get a better handle of what it looks like first before we know where it's going. But for now, this is the best estimate replicated by the cone here by the National Hurricane Center. And notice the intensity goes up. Now, that's another tricky part of it. If this thing does get indeed its act together, let's say as it moves northward across parts of the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, it could strengthen a lot more than what the guidance is telling us. But one last graphic I want to show you to give you an idea of where, let's say, Isaias is expected to be over the weekend. Very close to Florida. Bring in some squally weather, heavy rain, gusty winds, coastal flooding issues. And it's not just Florida. It's also the southeast United States, potentially all the way up the East Coast. That is a lot to deal with, and I'll talk much more about the intensity forecast coming up in just a little bit. Alex.
All right, thanks, Dr. Postel. Well, Florida is going to be pausing testing for the coronavirus for several days due to the threat of Tropical Storm Isaias. Sites like this drive-through in Miami-Dade County, they're going to be closed on Thursday evening here. So this evening, it won't reopen until Tuesday morning. That's all according to Florida's Department of Health. Some locations could be closed for longer, all depending on the weather.
Drains downhill and through these small channels can flood big time. That's what we're seeing right now. It is 1/2 the hour here on Weather Center Live. I'm meteorologist Chris Horn. We do have team coverage for you, continuing to track Tropical Storm Isaias as it roars on through the islands right now. Let's go to storm specialist Mark Elliott, where the tropical storm is now, what we're expecting it to be, the best we can say, and where we think it could go, the best we can say. Mark.
Yeah, gosh, there are still more questions and answers at this point. We have to get past Hispaniola, past the Dominican Republic, and then the models will have a much better handle on things. There are really conflicting signs right now. In one regard, we can see some spin. Just watching this area, it does appear that there is a center of circulation, and so that's more organized than where we were at this time yesterday, for sure. However, some of the clouds on that north side have been collapsing. Some of the action on the south side has been increasing with a secondary area of spin down here. So there's still kind of an open trough look to this as opposed to a true organized tropical system. All of that said, the 2 o'clock advisory brought us the a position update with the center right in here. 60-mile-per-hour winds moving northwest at 20. And you can see that kind of double center, if you will. One little spin up here, another one down here. Both of those are areas that we are watching. There's one of them, there's the other. And so will one of those take over? The models are saying this one. But gosh, it's just not it's almost not organized enough to be able to say that for sure at this point. And this is the water vapor imagery showing you some of the collapse of the deepest tropical moisture, but that's also a function of the time of day. Overnight, that will come right back in. The tropical storm warnings have been discontinued, Puerto Rico and points east, so you can breathe a sigh of relief. But Chris was right. There are a lot of flash flood warnings. Gosh, that video was scary. And the rain not quite as bad, but look, almost everybody has a warning. We can just go through all these different areas. All those green lines are different warnings. And so, Jackie, as we look down the road from here, we have not eliminated the United States as having direct impacts here. Florida, the East Coast, even the Gulf, still an outside chance that this storm could come towards the Gulf side. So, gosh, a lot to still fine-tune right now.
We are tracking Tropical Storm Isaias. The system strengthening late last night, and South Florida is still in the cone of uncertainty. We are monitoring what will happen to this storm once it passes the mountains of the Dominican Republic and heads in our general direction.
And it might face some trouble there, so let's get right to our weather authority. Hurricane expert Brian Norcross is standing by live. But
we're going to start things off with our meteorologist, Luke Doris.
All right, thank you, guys. Here's the 2 p.m. advisory. We'll have a new advisory and a new cone by 5 p.m., but this is what we have as of an hour ago. Winds to 60 miles per hour, so strong tropical storm force winds, though it's over the Dominican Republic right now, so those winds a little in question. They're probably on the north side. Moving northwest at 20 miles per hour, so that does still bring it in our general direction. Let's take a closer view at the cone. And a couple of the changes here from previous cones, especially since last night, is the nudge on the right side, more toward the northeast. That gets the Keys out of the cone, though we know that the impacts extend well outside that because the cone just tells us where the center is expected to be. Notice the time. This is by Saturday. Dade, Broward still included in that cone. And you also notice this. The winds have come up a little bit now. Upper register tropical storm force forecast by the National Hurricane Center by Saturday and into Sunday. So we've had tropical storm warnings hoisted for the central and southeastern Bahama Islands, and then a tropical storm watch for the northwestern Bahamas. And it's really a matter of time before we have the watches expand into South Florida. And what that means is that tropical storm conditions are possible within 48 hours. So I'd like to bring in our hurricane specialist, Brian Norcross. Brian, we've seen the adjustment in the cone, and we've seen the winds, get up there near hurricane force in the forecast. Has the threat level to South Florida changed or not?
I don't think it's really changed, Luke. So the fact that we have this very uncertain situation, so the cone is likely to shift around back and forth a little bit as new forecasts come in based on the origination point of the forecast or what's going on with the storm right now. And it's really important to understand that the average error in wind forecasts when you're talking 2 days out, for example, is about 15 miles an hour, 15, maybe even a little more, closer to 20 miles an hour with an undeveloped system. So when they're forecasting a 70 mile an hour or 65 mile an hour storm, they're actually forecasting the possibility of it being into hurricane territory. So just bear that in mind. Don't look at that and say they're not forecasting a hurricane, because there is a range with all the forecasts. All right, let's look at the satellite picture. There's been significant developments here this afternoon. You noted where the Hurricane Center actually located the center over the Dominican Republic. I don't think it's over the Dominican Republic anymore. I think it's up here right on the north coast up there. They had a hurricane hunter out there. They searched down to the south, really couldn't completely find a center. They looked up in the north and didn't find one, but when circulations get involved with these mountainous islands, very often there's a sudden jump in where the lowest pressure is, where the circulation is. And I think that's happening now, and I think we're looking at a pretty well-developed tropical storm now that's going to move away eventually from the Dominican Republic. Now, exactly how that works, I'm not sure. A quick look at it close up, and you can kind of see that circular look to it right in there. I think that's going to be our center. It's now going to move toward the Bahamas and much, much warmer water and more favorable conditions. So that's not too different from the forecast. Here's where the Hurricane Center had it at 2 o'clock. According to our satellite analysis, it's a little bit farther north, but generally the idea is heading toward the Bahamas. The big difference would be, if that analysis is correct, they were forecasting it to be 50 miles an hour here tonight. It's already 60 miles per hour, assuming it continues with that as it moves in this northwest direction. Obviously, the estimates are going to have to be adjusted in an upward direction. As you were showing, in our area, they were forecasting a top-end tropical storm with the idea that that could be a Category 1 hurricane. But the exact location, whether it's here, the main thing to know about this is if it's offshore to the right of the cone, it's probably stronger. If it's weaker, it's probably over here. When we look at the models, indeed, the models that keep it weak kind of bring it this way. The models that make it stronger generally take it off to the right. The red model is the one the Hurricane Center looks at, and if you notice, that's essentially down the center of their cone. That's how they make their forecast. So the thing, too, that is modulating this and giving us some hope that this isn't going to become a super strong hurricane is we do have this dry air here, and the upper level winds are going to push the dry air into the system and tend to push the strongest winds and the heaviest rain off to the east side. So unless it tracks up here somewhere, then most of the worst weather is going to stay out over the ocean, although it's too close to call, and certainly we would expect some bad weather here beginning Saturday morning. How bad is the open question, because we can't know exactly what the track of that storm is going to be. So that's where we stand right now, and we'll be back at 3:30. We're going to watch this satellite develop and see if the center really is already over the ocean or if it is involved somehow with those mountains, and be back with you at 3:30. So I'll see you then.
Well, Brandon, tropical storm Isaias pounding Puerto Rico, leaving people powerless and communities in a flood of trouble. 7's Gina Benitez is live in the Newsplex with a look at the impact on the island. Gina.
So the images we've seen have been intense. We've seen them really coming down all day on social media, people just pleading for help as their communities are ravaged. The parking lot of this Veterans Affairs clinic in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, underwater after tropical storm Isaias tore through. The area hit hard by the storm. In another part of the city, the water consuming the streets, creeping past the gates in this residential area. Whipping winds doing damage, the rain coming down hard. This video taken from a porch in Cabo Rojo. The person who shot it saying the power was out and water pressure was low. Winds reaching 60 miles per hour and more than 400,000 customers on the island left without power. Government officials say some 150,000 left without water.
And President Trump has approved an emergency declaration in Puerto Rico as a result of the storm. Live in the Newsplex, Gina Benitez, 7 News.
La tormenta tropical Isaías está castigando en estos momentos a República Dominicana tras causar estragos en Puerto Rico. En ambos países hay calles, hay viviendas inundadas, hay desastre y, por supuesto, cientos de miles de personas sin agua ni electricidad. Todo esto en medio de la crisis por la pandemia, lo que pues dificulta la situación. Vamos con Laura de la Nuez, que está en Santo Domingo con todo lo que está pasando en el Caribe. Laura.
Como ven, ya en la capital se sienten los embates de la tormenta Isaías, que al tocar suelo dominicano ya ha dejado una muerte y ha provocado el temor de muchos.
Esperando que Dios meta su mano, porque los pronósticos no son muy alentadores.
República Dominicana recibe hoy a Isaías en medio de una situación sanitaria compleja.
No tenemos ni albergue por la pandemia, porque no podemos aglomerarnos.
Las bandas exteriores del fenómeno tocaron tierra en la mañana. Punta Cana, una de las más importantes zonas turísticas del país, recibía los primeros embates. Los fuertes vientos ya causaron la muerte de un agricultor por la caída de postes eléctricos y el derrumbe de edificaciones en la capital. Pero con el paso de las horas, toda la isla está en alerta. Más de 72,000 personas ya están sin energía eléctrica y nadie puede acercarse a las zonas costeras. No obstante, algunos todavía se juegan la vida por surfear en medio de la tormenta. Pero el mayor temor está en aquellos más vulnerables.
Toca cuidarse porque ahora mismo da miedo ya a los hospitales. Con la poca conciencia, los dominicanos están abarrotados por el virus.
Las autoridades han dispuesto el envío de asistencia alimenticia, artículos de primera necesidad y kit de prevención de coronavirus a las provincias más afectadas. Horas antes de llegar a Quisqueya, Isaías causó estragos en Puerto Rico, donde hoy continúan las lluvias y el Servicio Nacional de Meteorología emitió un aviso de inundaciones repentinas para varios municipios y la advertencia de que aún las consecuencias del fenómeno no terminan. Así quedaron las calles de Mayagüez. Muchas personas buscaban salir de sus carros inundados para ponerse a salvo. En esa misma ciudad, varias familias tuvieron que ser rescatadas por la Guardia Nacional debido al aumento súbito del nivel de las aguas. La tormenta ha dejado a cientos de miles de puertorriqueños sin agua ni electricidad debido a la caída de tendido eléctrico y la crecida de ríos y represas. Isaías podría tocar tierra el sábado en el sur de Estados Unidos. Allí las autoridades ya ordenaron el cierre de todos los centros de pruebas de coronavirus que controla el estado y en zonas de inundaciones los residentes toman las medidas de precaución indispensables.
Ya en República Dominicana han comenzado las evacuaciones de las personas que podrían estar afectadas y las autoridades han asegurado hay camas disponibles en los hospitales en caso de una eventualidad. Ahora regreso contigo.
Bueno, y hablando de Puerto Rico y esas inundaciones, realmente preocupa, pues años después de que pasara por allí el huracán María, todavía hay viviendas en Puerto Rico que tienen las carpas azules porque no han podido reparar sus techos. Así que esta es una tragedia sobre otra que aún no se ha superado.
Yeah, Trina, Tropical Storm Isaias, that latest 5 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center has come out, and now portions of Florida are in a tropical storm watch. That is from Ocean Reef, so Monroe County, all the way up to Sebastian Inlet. Those are areas that will likely see tropical storm conditions here as we go into the weekend. So the latest details from this 5 o'clock advisory, not much change in the winds. Still 60 mile per hour sustained winds from this system, moving northwest still at 20 miles per hour. But let's take a peek at that track and show you exactly how that has changed. Right now, expecting this system to move into portions of the Bahamas here as we go into Friday. But note what happens. Becoming a Category 1 hurricane, this latest track has it gaining some steam here as we go into late Friday into early Saturday. Category 1 as it moves over the northwestern Bahamas, which are now under a tropical storm watch as well. And just to the east of South Florida would be a Category 1 hurricane by Saturday. Now, the impacts will be far-reaching. Again, we talked about this last hour. Those the winds, along with some heavy rain, along with some rough surf, all impacts that we could see. And those tropical storm force winds at this time are extending out over 300 miles from this storm. So just because we've seen a slight shift to the east in this system, and we don't see all of our area in the cone, we still will be watching for impacts that move into our area here as we head into Saturday. We're going to take a closer look at some of the satellite data, see what's going on, and I'll bring you more details coming up in just a bit. Guys, back over to you.
All right, Angie, thank you so much. And with a possible landfall right here in South Florida, people are already getting ready. Many have been going to supplies and getting those supplies. Our team coverage continues right now with NBC6's Natalia Ortiz live outside a Home Depot with the very latest. Natalia.
That's right. I do want to mention at this Home Depot in particular, we haven't seen a lot of movement of shoppers buying things related to the storm. I do want to tell people, though, in terms of COVID-19 testing centers, I know it's a slight change of subject, but it's really related, believe it or not. Because of the potential of this storm hitting South Florida, the mayor of Miami-Dade County has said that all of the county and state-supported COVID-19 testing sites will be closing starting this evening, and this is just one of the steps that local leaders are taking in order to prepare for the potential landing of this storm.
With the possibility of Tropical Storm Isaias in our midst, officials in Miami-Dade County say they're taking preliminary steps in case it strikes South Florida.
We've got 20 shelters on basically a standby. We've sent the equipment that's needed to open them, but at this point we're not opening them yet. We will have another one of these conferences tomorrow at 9 o'clock when we get further information and we have a better idea of where the storm is going to keep the residents informed of what we're doing, and at that time we may pull the trigger on opening some shelters.
Earlier today in Doral, some businesses were giving out sandbags, but the shoppers we spoke to as they exited a hardware store in southwest Miami-Dade said they're not prepping just yet.
Are you a South Floridian?
Yes.
Okay, so you've been through storms before?
Yes,
here?
Hurricane Andrew, which is very serious.
but this seems like, I mean, it looks like it could potentially grow, but I don't think it's going to be anything, out of this world or crazy.
So obviously we still don't know. If it remains to be seen whether that shopper is right or not, right? So definitely it's better to be safe than sorry. I do want to tell you that the city of Hallandale Beach will be distributing free sandbags starting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And this, of course, is for residents and local businesses in the city of Hallandale Beach. So now you know, if you're a viewer there, you can go get your free sandbag tomorrow starting at 9 at the Big Easy Casino. Live in Southwest Miami-Dade, I'm Natalia Ortiz, NBC 6 News.
Live, the news on NBC 6 at 11 starts now.
Off the top, tracking Isaias, South Florida under a tropical storm watch. Isaias now exiting the Dominican Republic after lashing Puerto Rico, and we are all anxiously awaiting the new advisory. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jackie Nesbro.
And I'm Juan Strader. Good evening to you. Now the question is, what will Isaias do next? South Florida's Chief Meteorologist John Morales has been tracking the storm constantly and has a new 11 p.m. advisory. How about it, John?
Hey, Jackie and Juan. So I'm going to start off a little bit differently here. Instead of showing you, the coordinates and the maximum winds, let's just talk about the steering currents for this system going forward. And generally speaking, these tropical systems are steered by the Bermuda High. It's that big H on the map there, just to the south of that little tiny dot, which represents Bermuda. Now, the Bermuda High is sprawling and normally extends to the east coast of the U.S., but this weekend, we get closer to the weekend, tomorrow into Saturday, there's a dip in the jet stream coming. It's labeled here on this map for you as an upper level trough that would weaken the high, or said another way, it would pick up the storm and deflect it to the north. And that is why the forecast from the National Hurricane Center, which by the way is the one you're looking at right here, keeps the storm about 100 miles offshore Miami, 100 miles east of here on Saturday. As a hurricane, though, for the Bahamas. And by the way, the Bahamas are now under a hurricane warning, while we sit here much more comfortably under a tropical storm watch. Now, as you look at this, this is the wind swath product. In other words, it's a future tracking tracker showing you wind speeds going into this weekend. You see how the Bahamas could have winds of, greater than 60, possibly 70, 80 miles an hour. It's right there on the map for places from Nassau through Grand Bahama. But for us, we're talking mainly in the 20 to 30 mile an hour range for our winds. So why is there a tropical storm watch in effect for our area? Well, it's because there are inherent uncertainties, right? When you're forecasting the weather, particularly tropical storms. So in case we are wrong in this forecast that it will pass 100 miles away, well, we've issued a tropical storm watch, or the Hurricane Center has issued a tropical storm watch for our metro area. And that includes from Ocean Reef northbound all the way to the Sebastian Inlet. Here's the 11 p.m. forecast from the Hurricane Center showing that cone of concern, which does not touch the Florida Keys, it does not touch Miami-Dade County, and it barely clips Broward County. And then other parts of Florida are under that cone of concern, with the hurricane then passing to our east and then eventually out into the northeastern section of the U.S. Other parts of the U.S., by the way, may have to deal with a hurricane too. I'll be back with more, including the weekend forecast, in a bit.
This is CBS 4 News This Morning.
Well, hello there. It is 4:30 Friday, July 31st. I'm Maribel Rodriguez.
And I'm Carly Barnett. Thank you for joining us. We begin by tracking Hurricane Isaias. The storm is gaining strength and it reached hurricane status overnight.
And this morning, much of South Florida is waking up under a tropical storm watch. Let's get right to CBS 4's meteorologist, Lisette Gonzalez, with the latest on Hurricane Isaias. Lisette, good morning.
Good morning, Maribel and Carly. Good morning, everyone. Here we are Friday and now tracking Hurricane Isaias as it strengthened overnight. And you can see the max sustained winds of 80 miles per hour, making this a Category 1 located 45 miles southeast of Great Inagua Island. It is moving to the northwest at 18 miles an hour. And yes, currently we are seeing Broward, Miami-Dade County, and even parts of the Upper Keys under that tropical storm watch. And that stretches even up up through much of Palm Beach County. Now, hurricane warnings have been issued pretty much for all of the Bahamas, and tropical storm warning remains in effect for portions of the Turks and Caicos and Hispaniola. As we take a look at the National Hurricane Center's forecast cone and the threat area that I was talking to you about yesterday, the area is shaded in yellow, indicating tropical storm conditions likely, and now we're starting to see red popping up later on in the forecast period. So I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, tropical storm conditions, as you can see across Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas as we head throughout the day today and into tomorrow. Notice how there is some red indicating hurricane conditions likely now through portions of the central and northwestern Bahamas. And for us, we are seeing the potential for tropical storm conditions as soon as late tonight, but especially in through tomorrow and for much of the east coast here of southeast Florida. And then it looks like Isaias will continue moving north and then headed up possibly towards the Carolina coast and could still be making its way towards parts of the northeast New England areas as we head into next week. Could be just offshore. Again, too soon to say. There's still a lot of uncertainty, but we are starting to see the models coming closer together, at least more of the reliable models that we tend to focus on. And you'll notice those really clustered together and moving Isaias northwestward and then likely taking a turn to the north across the Bahamas. Still a few outliers, if you will, but there is a look at Hurricane Isaias as we see the heavy thunderstorms and high winds across parts of Dominican Republic and also into Haiti. So yeah, today we're going to want to check flashlights, generators in case of power outages due to the winds. No shutters are recommended for this storm, and we are nice and quiet for now. We'll have the rest of your Friday and weekend forecast ahead.
All right, let's head back to South Florida and Steph in Broward County this morning. Now, Steph, let's talk more about how people are going to react. You're from this area. Will people start to pay attention now that it's a hurricane?
Jen, we've already had people come up to our live shot. In fact, there's a gentleman just off to right here said, Abrams, keep it away, keep it away. We've had enough here in 2020, and, you know, we're going to do the best we can here by trying to get this hurricane to stay offshore. Let's bring in the director of the National Hurricane Center, Ken Graham. Director Graham, thanks for being with us this morning. What are the key takeaways from this storm?
The real key takeaways here, Stephanie, are, we can't just look at that, the track. Can't just look at where that center is. These storms are big. I mean, the tropical storm force winds extend out about 180 miles out, to the northeast east of the center. So it's about the winds. It's about the heavy surf, rip currents. I mean, we're going to have very dangerous surf and rip currents that everybody needs to be aware of. And you're going to have elevated tides and the winds and the heavy rainfall. So we always have to remember it's about the impacts. Don't just let our guard down because the actual center may be offshore. Still pay attention so close to all those impacts that we forecast.
And Ken, the fact that it's just offshore makes it for a tricky forecast, right? Because 20 miles one way or another way can make or break those impacts.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And, a little bit of we always talk about this. It's something that I like to say, little wiggles matter, because if you have a little wiggle or a wobble, all of a sudden those hurricane force winds are on shore. So that's why, look, we can't let our guard down on this. So it's very important not to concentrate just on that center point, not just on that track, but just be prepared.
All right, so you guys are forecasting during a pandemic. How has that changed things for the National Hurricane Center?
For us, it's, when you really look at preparedness, it's listening to those local officials to see if anything's changed. But here at the Hurricane Center, I mean, we're social distancing. We're wearing masks in the building. We've actually put tape around where the forecasters are, and we've moved workstations to keep them separate. So distancing and safety is everything so we can get through the season and be here for everybody the entire season.
Speaking of the season, it's been a record breaker already. What would you say is the most interesting thing, not only about this season, but this storm in particular?
It's interesting. I was commenting on this a few days ago. If you look at the satellite and start seeing, the waves coming off of Africa, and you start seeing, these storms develop like they are, it reminds me of an August satellite. So yeah, the season very much underway. We've already had landfalls, and it continues to be busy. So preparedness is everything. Stephanie, we talk about this all the time, just being ready so early, this whole weather ready nation thing, and preparing early is just more important than ever this season.
All right, Director of the National Hurricane Center, Ken Graham, always good to hear from you, and I'm sure we'll be checking in with you throughout the duration of this storm. And Jim, speaking of prepared, today is the day if you want to make those preparations. I say get those flashlights ready, right? Because even a tropical storm wind could take out power to some, at the very least.
Absolutely. And remember, you know, if you're one of those who waits till the last minute to go to the line to the store, you're going to have to be 6 feet apart from the person in front of you. So those lines that are already long, imagine how long they are when you spread everybody 6 feet out. Yeah, Jen, really interesting stuff happening over the last 24 hours with Isaias getting upgraded to a hurricane. That's not so much a big deal as the fact that you had something that was supposed to go over Hispaniola and get wrecked. It's not often that you see an increase of 20 knots in the power of something that goes over a landmass of that magnitude with mountains that are over 7,000 feet. So what happened here, you can see the satellite below us. Of course, the center is off of my toe, heading through the Turks and Caicos this morning. But 80 miles an hour. Remember, if yesterday morning when you were watching us, this was supposed to be a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm. Now we have an 80-mile-an-hour hurricane. We've got work to do in intensity forecast, don't we? That mid-level center that we saw pivot on the Puerto Rico radar yesterday, past the Mona Passage, never touched any land, or at least elevation to speak of. The fact that it was there and you had the actual center kind of push its way across the southwest part of Hispaniola, or the Dominican Republic here, that is where eventually the two kind of met up on the north side, and the vorticity that was created by all of that gives us our new center. That blew up last night. The hurricane centers were in there. They, you know, pretty much were flying around. All of a sudden, boom, we had some winds that were up to 80 miles per hour. So guess what? You've got an 80-mile-per-hour hurricane this morning that is still being invested by, this time, the NOAA hurricane hunters. And what's interesting is there's not only a NOAA plane out there, but there's also the hurricane hunters out there. There's dual missions, and I don't recall how often that happens. So I got a message out, a tweet out to the Hurricane Center this morning asking them about that, because that's just really, really interesting to me. And Jen pointed that out earlier, and I thought that was really interesting, because I don't recall seeing that too often. Here's the good news this morning. The plane doesn't see a lot. Okay, we don't have even a hurricane force gust yet, and they've gone through some of that deep convection. So what's going on in through here? Is this thing peaked out? Is it going to be a 100-mile-an-hour hurricane as it's forecast? That's a good question. All right, are we starting to get into some of the shear now? One thing's for sure, we got a big wind field still, and this wind is pushing that water off to the west, and it will track off to the west with that water. So these waves, and there will be a storm surge component that even comes into Florida, even without a landfall. There will be a water rise coming up toward the Florida coast. You can see that the models, at least the center point of that guidance, keep the hurricane force winds offshore. Remember, a weaker storm is going to tend to follow that western track. A stronger storm maybe a little bit more toward the east side. Either way, Jen, as we know, even close storms to Florida have big impacts.
Oh, yeah. We've seen it time and time again.
But there is this other big headline every South Floridian is watching right now. Hurricane Isaias. This is where the Category 1 hurricane is now. Winds as strong as 80 miles per hour. A tropical storm watch has been issued for Miami-Dade and Broward counties, extending northward into the Sebastian Inlet. Want to give you a look at video out of Puerto Rico. The island still recovering from 2017 Hurricane Maria, as well as earthquakes from earlier this year, now facing more destruction caused by Isaias. The storm leaving more than 400,000 people in the dark again, and some 150,000 people without water again. Thank you for being with us this midday. I'm Roxanne Vargas.
And I'm Johnny Archer. A lot to get to this midday, beginning with the hurricane in the Atlantic. NBC6 has team coverage this midday of the first hurricane to pose a threat to South Florida. NBC6 reporter Julia Bagg is live in Hollandale Beach, where people are getting sandbags prepared for any type of flooding. But we want to begin our team coverage with First Alert meteorologist Angie Lastman, who is tracking this storm. And Angie, I understand that you just got a new advisor in. What's the latest with that?
Yeah, just got this 11 a.m. advisory in from the National Hurricane Center. Of course, there was a NOAA plane and a Hurricane Hunter plane out kind of looking at what's going on with this system. And here's what they found. Winds have come down just slightly, about 5 miles per hour. Now we're checking in at 75 miles per hour as far as our winds are concerned. Still the Category 1 hurricane. but just barely, moving northwest a little slower, now at 16 miles per hour, and the pressure has come up a little bit. We're looking a little bit lopsided. You can kind of tell on the satellite imagery that most of the activity for this system is sitting to the north and east of the center of the storm. Look just to the south, Cuba barely seeing cloud cover. So that's a little bit of an indication that this storm is trying to get its act together. Still thinking, though, that it will potentially pose some impacts here as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours. It is already battering parts of the Bahamas as well as Turks and Caicos, where hurricane warnings and tropical storm warnings are in effect. We here in South Florida are now under a tropical storm warning. So what does that mean? It means that impacts, tropical storm conditions, will be felt within 24 hours. So that is exactly what we're watching. We zoom up and out. There are the rest of those hurricane warnings and tropical storm warnings as well. No more of those issued for parts of Hispaniola. Instead, now we're focusing on the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, and Florida. As we look ahead to exactly what we're going to be dealing with, here is how this latest track plays out. Category 1 hurricane. The last update did bring it to Category 2. I think gradual strengthening is expected at this point. They're not going past 90 miles per hour at this point with the sustained winds. That happens early Saturday morning, and it's moving a little bit slower. There's only been gradual changes with the track, so still the impacts for us remain to be the potential for tropical storm force winds. Reasonable worst case scenario, we could see some of those stronger winds the farther north you go, northeastern Broward County and points into Palm Beach County. As far as rainfall, anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of rain with isolated amounts of 6 inches. So those impacts haven't changed a whole lot, Johnny. But now over the next 12 hours is really going to be where we kind of pinpoint some certainty as far as just where that center of that storm will be. We're looking at it battling wind shear. That's going to be a big thing for us to watch here over the next couple of hours to see just how this storm reacts to that and where we go in the coming hours and days. We'll bring it back over to you. We'll have more updates coming up.
All right, Angie, I know you'll stay on top of any developments. And right now it's the time to prepare what's predicted to be an active hurricane season. We just saw that projected path of Hurricane Isaias will affect South Florida.
Take a look right now at some of the areas that are feeling the impacts of this storm, this hurricane right now. And of course, that would be and include right here, the Bahamas. This is a live look right now, cloudy skies over the Bahamas, Nassau right now, Blue Lagoon Island here, courtesy of Weather Stem. And, you know, Bahamas, big area, big island nation here that stretches from just to the east of South Florida all the way down to north of far eastern Cuba and close to the Turks and Caicos. So looking at a big area here with out ahead of it some of the high clouds that we're seeing, this storm with the meat of it right in here, and some of the outflow starting to be shown and evident well away from the system. This is a 75-mile-an-hour Category 1 hurricane, so just a couple of miles an hour away from being back down to a tropical storm. And with this, it is so possible that we're going to have stronger winds. But the way things are right now, it's just sort of hanging in there at the moment. A look at the visible satellite does show some pretty healthy thunderstorms in here and in here, also right in here. What else I think is interesting to look at is just seeing the swirl, the inflow here, what some of the clouds are doing at the little bit lower levels of the atmosphere. Now, you can't see very well exactly where the center of the circulation is, but you can kind of make out where some of these clouds are. There's these wispy clouds right in here that are a little bit higher, but you can kind of see just the motion and where there is that counterclockwise swirl associated with this hurricane right now. Hurricane warnings are in effect for the Bahamas. You can see that right here with this storm moving over the Bahamas first and then eventually getting to the United States with hurricane watches in effect, tropical storm warnings in effect for parts of Florida.
Local 10 News starts right now.
All right now at 3:30, we are under a tropical storm warning as Hurricane Isaias gets closer and closer.
South Florida is still in the cone of uncertainty, and your weather authority is here to explain everything for us. We have our hurricane specialist, Brian Norcross. He's going to join us with an analysis of the storm in just a minute.
But let's get right to Luke Doris. Luke, what's it looking at outside right now?
Well, at the moment, everything's nice and quiet here in South Florida, but we do still have a Category 1 hurricane that's to our southeast.
winds to 75 miles per hour as of 2 p.m. and moving northwest in our general area as we go through the next couple of days. All right, so the forecast is tonight moving through the central Bahamas and then closer to us by Saturday, and gradual strengthening there to 90-mile-per-hour winds by Saturday morning. That's a Category 1 hurricane, but still increasing up that register. Let's take a closer look at it. Here's the cone, and you see the winds staying somewhat consistent, maybe even tapering off by Sunday. There are some conditions up there that could drop it. And here's the center of the cone. If it were to run right down that track, the center of the storm would stay offshore, but we'd likely still see some impacts from that even in South Florida. And then we've noticed a westward nudge on the left side of the cone a little bit. That cone has moved since the last cone, and with that it still includes portions of South Florida. So the timing here would be Saturday, starting in the morning and lasting through the day. But I'd like to bring in our hurricane specialist, Brian Norcross. Brian, you know, we have a hurricane in the forecast on Saturday as it makes its closest approach, and even the forecast cone includes the possibility of a landfall nearby. But the thinking has been, if that were to happen, it would be a weaker version of the storm. Is that right? And what impacts would we see under that scenario?
Well, that's the thinking. The thinking is that if it were to stay to the left side of the cone, it would be a weaker storm. So therefore, maybe it would be a tropical storm, and a tropical storm warning at the coast would still be appropriate. If it were stronger, it would be farther offshore, it would go farther north, and we would get the fringe of a stronger storm. And again, the tropical storm warning is appropriate. Now, models coming in this afternoon indicate a shift toward the coast again, all the way up the East Coast. I'll show you that in just a second. The analysis underway at the Hurricane Center in an hour and 15 minutes or so. We should get that analysis. Is going to be very, very interesting. Let's look at what's going on with the hurricane right now, because this is really what the story is all about for South Florida. If you look at the way it's structured, look how much of bright white there is on this side versus on this side over here. So it's a very right side loaded, the strongest weather all to the right side of the storm. As a matter of fact, you see this moisture being thrown out here, and you notice it's just kind of evaporating in this very dry air. If you look outside here in South Florida, you see it's a little bit hazy. That's a little Sahara dust in the air. There's a layer of dryness up there. So as the hurricane is plowing north, it's plowing into that dryish air, and especially on this side where some upper level winds are trying to push that dry air into it. As far as the cone goes, yeah, here is the latest cone. Now, this is from 11 o'clock this morning, so this was based on the computer forecast models that came in this morning. And now, as you're going to see in a moment, we have seen something of a shift. But the bottom line is, for our friends in Nassau, here comes the storm. Most possible tracks inside that cone are going to put very bad weather into the capital of the Bahamas and all those islands there on the east side of the Bahamas, which are kind of the populated islands. So just bearing that in mind. Now, as far as the Florida effect from this, here's the thing, is that because from the Palm Beaches south, the coastline kind of kicks in, then what that means is that as the storm comes up here, it's farther away from the coast. In Dade and Broward, then when it gets to Palm Beach County, it's closer, no matter what it does, as long as it comes from this cone and it takes some kind of an angle at the coast. So that's why in Miami-Dade and Broward, we're talking about tropical storm force winds, meaning 40 to 75 miles an hour, say gusting most likely in the 60, maybe 65 mile an hour range, somewhere in there. But then from Palm Beach County north, there's the possibility of winds over 75 miles an hour, and it's got to do with the fact that Palm Beach right there sticks out into the cone, and then all this is kind of parallel. Besides that, the storm is forecast to do something like that, which we'll see in the model in a second. Now, we talked about the watches and warnings. So here's Miami-Dade and Broward in the yellow. That's a tropical storm warning. Here is that hurricane watch to the north. And again, that's because of you can just see the geometry of the track that's causing that to be the higher threat on up there. So here's the model. There's the model that Cone is based on. Here's the newer models this afternoon. So the weaker storm to the left is what the models we've seen have forecast all the way up the coast. So we'll see, Luke, what the National Hurricane Center does with this, because this trend toward the coast and toward a weaker storm changes our dynamic. I don't think it changes our warnings, but I think it does change the forecast dynamic. Back to you.
Brian, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in, about an hour and a half? 5 p.m. is when that comes. Another question that we've had is, what direction will the winds be coming from? This is Saturday at noon. Generally think northeast, and then as it lifts north, generally north, maybe starting to get a little bit of northwest in there, and then as it departs, this is as we get into late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, northerly shifting around to northwesterly, then finally westerly. So that's going to be the general wind flow as it makes its approach to South Florida, if it goes on that track, which is what we're thinking at this point. Janice, back to you.
All right, just came in. We have the very latest advisory on Hurricane Isaias, and this is what we have as of 11 p.m. Still 80-mile-per-hour winds moving northwest at 15, now 135 miles southeast of Nassau. More importantly, let's take a look at the forecast cone. Still, high pressure is the main driver of the system. They are keeping it as a Category 1 now, at least until it leaves Florida, and then it should turn into a tropical storm. The close-up cone suggests that the system will probably be at 85 miles per hour by Saturday morning, moving right across Andros Island. Still 85-mile-per-hour winds as it makes its way across South Florida. Now the cone has shifted just a little bit further to the east. It was encompassing a little bit more of northeastern Miami-Dade County, but really no big change. We have to remain vigilant. These systems do not travel in a straight line. They wobble east, they wobble west, and if unfortunately, as it passes by South Florida, it is making a westward bubble, then we could get directly hit by a Category 1. We'll have a lot more later on at 11. We'll be right back.
Right now in the Atlantic, things are busy. Our Hurricane Isaias, an area to watch, and Tropical Depression 10. All these things continue to give us what we've got so far, which is 9 named storms, a possible 10th named storm, and an area to watch, which has about a 30% chance of developing. Now, we'll go first to Tropical Depression number 10. This is just coming off the Cabo Verde Islands, 35-mile-per-hour depression, pressure 1,007 millibars, moving northwest at 14 miles an hour. And you can see the Hurricane Center here does keep it at a tropical depression, doesn't bring it to tropical storm strength as it continues to move east as we go through the weekend, or to the west, excuse me, and through Saturday evening. Weekends to a 30-mile-per-hour depression, then eventually does have it weakening out. However, we're well ahead of season here in the 2020 Atlantic Basin so far. The average date of the 10th named storm is October 19th. Now, we're not saying we're going to get there, but the earliest date of the 10th named storm is August 22nd, Jose, in 2005. We remember that year. But if we do get the J-storm, J-storm would be Josephine. So they can just keep rolling along here. Although we haven't had significant impacts yet in this hurricane season. Certainly, Tevin, it is a year that we are well ahead of schedule in terms of number of named storms. Let's hope that we keep the impact low, but we're certainly thinking Isaias is going to have at least some impact.
Exactly, and it only takes one impact for one person, for your house, for your community, or your town.
And the storm will be coming in tonight into tomorrow for Florida. It will really be a Sunday, Monday event. So you have the day today to bring in, you know, any outdoor furniture if you want to do that, maybe some outdoor plants, because you could lose power with this storm in Florida. Here's the thing, it's going to skirt right along the coast. It's still a hurricane, Category 1, and those winds, hurricane force winds, extend out 35 miles from the center. So even if we don't have loads of rain on the west side, you're still going to have some of those stronger winds. Tropical storm force winds, those are going to extend usually 100, 200 miles from the center as well. That, of course, will fluctuate as the storm goes north. Speaking of going north, this thing is going to ride all along I-95 from South Florida and take it all the way into New England. So a lot of us will be feeling the effects of this system as we head into midweek this upcoming week. We have advisories, we have those watches and warnings, but what you need to know is that all of this is going to really start tonight, and then tomorrow is game day for Isaias here into Florida. And even if you live inland, again, if this thing is riding just 15 miles off the coast, you could have that eye wall scraping the coast. If it's 40 miles off the coast, then you're not going to have the eye wall, but you still have those tropical storm force winds. Now let's talk about the hurricane hunters. This is what it looked like yesterday when they were flying through Isaias. They gave us a bird's eye view, just beautiful there, of this storm. That's the interesting thing about weather. It is so destructive yet so beautiful simultaneously, and that's hard to resolve in our brains sometimes. And speaking of the hurricane hunters, the NOAA flight is in there right now. The Air Force is on their way to go into this, and then we're going to have another couple flights this afternoon at 1:30. What are they doing? They're taking all sorts of measurements that we'll put into the weather models and help us determine better what's going to happen with this storm. For a while, they were just trying to find the center of circulation with this system. We need those planes to get the observations. So the center of circulation, the eye wall, remember, let's just do, it's been a while here, let's do a little hurricane, preview, okay, and review. The eye wall is where you have the worst winds. So that is absolutely what we want to stay offshore. If that's just skimming the coast, even as a Category 1, I've been in a lot of Category 1s. They will do damage. Hannah in Texas did damage, significant flooding. I mean, it was, a beast if you're in that eye wall. The eye is the calm of the storm. So those winds, at least tropical storm force, because again, in these storms, the tropical storm force winds usually extend 100, 200 miles out from the center. Those are going to arrive tonight and then again tomorrow, and probably we'll be feeling them still as we head into our Monday. Detailed look at Miami. Miami looks like it's going to come just to our north, but we still could have gusty winds. So I do think you should be prepared for power outages. Miami, Homestead, Kendall, these areas, a tree falls down, you lose power, then just make sure you have your flashlights around. Thunderstorms, obviously, with this, we've already seen a couple bands row through. I'm actually watching another band. I should actually look out there and see it coming on in. I'll look on the radar as well. Daytona Beach, all right, now we've moved northbound. We're heading towards Daytona, Sunday into Monday. And it could be quite fierce in Daytona. It could be coming ashore or just staying right. I mean, it is a hair. We've got to watch this thing. Again, rainfall with that dry air and that shear is going to be on the east side. That shear actually is what is helping us. Be thankful for that shear. If there was no shear, this thing could really crank and perhaps would be even stronger. But of course, Kelly, after it affects Florida, then we literally have North Carolina, South Carolina. I mean, I should just, Virginia, I could go all the way up the coast to Maine.
Yeah, millions of people in the path of this storm, Steph, and we can't rule out the possibility of water spouts even that could kind of spin up and move on shore with some of those rain bands too. So watch out for those as well. So you impacts the trough, keeping it cool over the Midwest. So it's kind of cool how it's all connected, right? So you've got the jet stream dip, those southwesterly winds kind of helping pull it northward and eventually northeastward and becoming a tropical storm as we get into early next week, but still having major impacts up and down the coast. And it's not just Hurricane Isaias that we're keeping a close eye on this morning. We've got two other areas of interest spinning in the Atlantic, an area to watch east of the Lesser Antilles, and Tropical Depression 10, which just developed off the coast of Africa. We don't think that one's going to last all that long, though. In fact, the National Hurricane Center is saying it's probably going to die later today. Winds are 35 miles per hour. It's moving toward the northwest at 16. Best news of all, it's not really having a direct impact. Maybe some higher surf around the Cabo Verde Islands, but other than that, we're thankful that tropical depression will be no more. All right, here's a look at the area to watch across the middle of the Atlantic. This one just to the east of the Lesser Antilles. 50% chance, odds of development, but not until we get into the 5-day period or beyond the next few days. And it's going to be happening here north of the islands, which is also good news that we're not expecting any impacts across the Caribbean islands. Well, don't go anywhere. Still much more to come on Hurricane Isaias. Coverage to come on AMHQ Weekend, including a closer look at how this storm is expected to impact communities along the country's east coast. That's still ahead.
Good morning, South Florida. We continue to track Hurricane Isaias, and right now we want to speak with the National Hurricane Center Director Ken Graham and just ask him a few questions because, you know, this has been a tricky hurricane to forecast over the past few days. We've noticed that cone shifting to the right, then to the left, then to the right. Of course, a lot of uncertainty with all the environmental factors and the steering flow. How's everyone feeling at the National Hurricane Center today, Ken, in terms of now the model is coming a little closer together and keeping the center of Isaias to the east, and what are the potential impacts that you are expecting for us here in South Florida?
Yeah, it's a great point that you make, because it was interesting with the models over the last 2-3 days. You know, a stronger storm would have been, you know, on the right side of the cone and a little further offshore, and then a weaker storm, the models would, you know, drag it back over to the left, so back and forth a little bit. So that's why we really stay steady here at the Hurricane Center. We stay steady with this forecast. So, you know, the forecast is right on track. It's really close to what we've been saying. So the impacts are coming. So, you know, for South Florida, you're going to start seeing some of these tropical storm force winds get close to us later tonight. And then on the approach, this is the interesting part that we got to pay attention to. It's not just a point. So even if the center is on the coast, right along the coast there, you know, the storm's bigger. The tropical storm force winds, the storm surge, and also you start looking at the rainfall is outside the cone. So that's something that we have to talk about. The impacts are much larger than the center.
Right. We also noticed that it's slowing down a little bit, and there's also some wind shear and dry air. How do you foresee those factors impacting Isaias here over the next 24 hours?
Yeah, I think you're going to see those fluctuations. I mean, if you look at this wind field, notice the southwest portion of it being eroded by wind shear. So we've had that wind shear on the west side of it interacting. So, you know, you get these thunderstorms that try to build up, and then the shear knocks them down, then it tries to get built up. So you're going to see the fluctuation of that shear, and it's really interesting. I was trying to think of a good way to do this. I like looking at this. This is actually the GFS, the American model simulated satellite, and you can see the storm right now. And then I want to show with time. I'm going to go ahead and loop this, and notice it looks good, then it doesn't look good, and it looks good. That's the fluctuation of that shear, you know, tilting the storm, coming back, tilting the storm. So it may not look perfect when we look at it, but the reality is on the ground, at the surface, you're still going to get that rain. We're still going to see 2 to 4 foot of storm surge in central portions on the east coast of Florida, and you're going to still see those impacts on the ground.
Yeah, it's still a hurricane. It's moving over those warm waters of the Bahamas, and it's still a little too close for comfort for us here in South Florida. So this is the reason why we just can't let our guard down, and we just need to prepare, right, for all these potential impacts. Even though the center is going to be to our east, as you mentioned, Ken, we're going to see the impacts well out and away from that center. So we appreciate your time. We know you're really busy out there, and we thank you and all the meteorologists at the National Hurricane Center for your hard work in tracking Hurricane Isaias. And as we look at the latest advisory, which of course the next big advisory will happen at 11 a.m. But as of 8 a.m., it is a Category 1. Hurricane Isaias has max sustained winds of 85 miles an hour, located 20 miles east of Andros Islands, Bahamas, moving northwest at 12 miles an hour. So yeah, that was a change as of earlier this morning, that it is slowing down a little bit. And so we're going to see the impacts a little bit later than we had anticipated yesterday and what the models were indicating. But yeah, tropical storm warning is still in place for Miami-Dade and Broward County, a tropical storm watch for inland and southern parts of Miami-Dade County, a hurricane watch for coastal Broward, hurricane warning stretching from Palm Beach County and areas northward, hurricane warnings in place for the Bahamas, currently experiencing some nasty weather. So hopefully our friends in the Bahamas are hunkering down inside and waiting for Hurricane Isaias to pass. And you can see those tropical storm conditions extending well out and away from the center, impacting the Bahamas as we head throughout the day today. Yes, the center is forecast to be to our east, and as we head into this afternoon and this evening is when we're going to see our weather conditions deteriorating, and more of those squalls and tropical storm force winds will be possible. As you'll notice here, we're here shaded in the yellow, and then Palm Beach County hurricane conditions getting too close as we head into this evening and overnight tonight. So we could see some hurricane force wind gusts here through parts of even northern Broward and Palm Beach County before Isaias moves north-northwest and likely just riding up or just along the coast here of the northeast Florida, and then heading towards the Carolinas, could be just offshore, and then up through the northeast New England area. Is certainly going to be keeping a close eye on Isaias. And we look at the satellite, and this is what we're talking about with that wind shear and the dry air, as it's looking a little ragged this morning, but still we are going to see the potential for power outages because of the strong winds. Easy to find flashlights. If the power goes out, you want to make sure you know where those flashlights are, the batteries too. Because of the wind, you're going to want to secure anything that's outside, bring in the patio furniture, and right now shutter is not necessary as we're expecting for the winds to be below hurricane force. But if you live in northern Broward County and if you feel more comfortable putting the shutters up, we're recommending on the north and the west side due to the flow of the wind. We're already seeing some rain bands that are moving in across parts of South Florida. These are moving quickly. They're racing across parts of Broward County. Some showers in Fort Lauderdale, Davie, Sunrise, and also we're seeing showers around North Miami, Miami Beach, downtown Miami, Coral Gables. All of this action is going to move quickly to the west. and some showers pushing towards Homestead, the southern Dade County area.
Dr. Postel, we have flipped the switch in the Atlantic, and I know, wow, we got a lot of things out there that are cranking.
Yeah, one of the windows that we always anticipate opening up for tropical development during any given hurricane season is open right now. Of course, we've got Hurricane Isaias there, an area to watch here, but a tropical depression just off the African coast. Where's that going? Is that going all the way across the ocean? And is it going to impact land like the United States? Probably not. It doesn't look like it. Tropical Depression 10 is a fairly small cluster of thunderstorms that does appear to be weakening on the most recent satellite presentation. The winds are estimated to be 35 miles per hour. Remember, we don't have any recon going into this thing right now. These are all based on satellites, but they're pretty good estimates, believe it or not. And we can expect that those winds will likely even decrease going forward in the next few days. This is the expected track from the Hurricane Center and its cone, showing you that likely within the next 24 to 48 hours, this thing will dissipate. Thankfully, we don't want any other storms on the horizon. TD10 won't be one of them, but we do have one on our doorstep, and we need to focus on this because it is closing in on the United States. It is moving right now. Isaias is Hurricane Isaias through the Bahamas right now with some very strong thunderstorms and very high winds right near the core still. All around the periphery, we've got showers rolling in off the Atlantic Ocean. Now, each one of these showers could contain wind gusts over 40 miles per hour. We've already seen that. So they may look pretty benign on the radar charts, but be careful. If you're outside and you see some dark clouds on the horizon, they're rapidly moving in on the circulation around Isaias and could bring damage with them even with 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts. Right now, West Palm, gust to 35. Miami, gust to 32 as some of those showers are rolling in. Freeport, 14. Nassau, calm. Not sure really what's going on there because if you look in tight, there's some pretty bad weather ongoing here in the Bahamas. Look at these thunderstorms flare up. The good news is they're not lasting a whole lot of time. In other words, they blow up and then they kind of fall down within a matter of hours. That's a sign that this thing is on the struggle bus a little bit in terms of trying to intensify. You can see on the bottom right part of your screen, Nassau in the Bahamas shows you that the weather there is still pretty uncomfortably bad with heavy rain showers in the vicinity. So overall, through the Bahamas, this is where the worst weather is right now, but it won't stay there. It's going to come closer to parts of Florida in the next 12 to 18 hours. Here's one estimate of where Isaias will be during the overnight hours tonight. Offshore, probably. A little wobble here and there, as Director Graham said, could make all the difference for the Florida coastline and bring higher winds and heavier rains and greater storm flooding. We have to watch out for that. But this is right now the best estimate with a very close encounter and bad weather up and down the Florida coast, especially during the day tomorrow with the close approach and movement of Hurricane Isaias. But Felicia, I know you're going to talk about lots of other weather around the country.
Meteorologist Zach Covey, though, with something we're a little nerding out over a little.
Yeah, it's something that's really kind of interesting, Lauren, and everybody at home should actually kind of keep an eye on this over the next several hours. First, we start off with winds because thunderstorm activity across the Bahamas, well, it's kind of falling apart. But just because the thunderstorm activity is falling apart does not mean the winds are. We certainly have found winds across the Bahamas as high as 60 miles per hour earlier this morning. So here's what's interesting about the storm, and this is something that we're going to need to keep an eye on and how it impacts the long-term track and eventually the impacts here in Florida. The colors indicate very cold cloud tops. Those colors indicate where the thunderstorm activity is. But the low-level spin is now starting to emerge off of some of our Bahamian island chains. And if you're saying, well, why is this thunderstorm activity not moving with the center? This center has essentially realized, and it's done it about 2 or 3 times since its life cycle was kind of born back out through Puerto Rico, this storm kind of has a sense of when it's in an unfavorable environment, whether that be strong wind shear, exceptionally dry air. And we have seen it now about 2 times before this time. When it's in an unfavorable environment, it sheds the thunderstorms because these thunderstorms are essentially weighing the storm down. If it's in an unfavorable environment carrying thunderstorms aloft, the thunderstorms are going to get sheared, dry air is going to get ingested into the center, and so it just very, very messy. And it takes a while for the storm to reorganize. But by shedding these thunderstorms away, by getting rid of the thunderstorms and just moving into an area with very little thunderstorms, but a more favorable environment, the storm is going to try and reform thunderstorms elsewhere. This has now happened 2 times, and typically during this kind of transition, we see less thunderstorm and intensity with the storm for about 12 hours. And then following those 12 hours, we tend to see the storm rapidly re-intensify back to around a 70, 80 mile per hour storm. So this is going to be very interesting. The center of circulation now coming offshore almost at a west-northwest track instead of a northwest track. As Lauren just said, we do have a hurricane hunter in there, and they are about to fix the center. So we're going to see if the track is still to the northwest or to the west-northwest. If it's west-northwest, that's going to be very interesting on how that future track may shift for us here in Florida. Lots of dry air. This arc cloud indicates that dry air has reached the center of the storm, and that's why it's kind of shedding those thunderstorms off. So over the next several hours, we're going to see how the intensity fluctuates. I think the storm may actually be reduced to a tropical storm at 2 p.m., to be completely frank with you. But it doesn't mean that it won't re-intensify at a later time. We've seen this now twice that it's done it, and both times it has re-intensified. The one other thing we need to keep an eye on is this ridge of high pressure. It continues to really remain north of the storm. Models have been terrible, to be frank, with this guidance. A lot of the models thought this ridge would be back out through Bermuda. It is not. It is still to the north of the storm. Until this ridge backs off, that's when the opening will arise for the storm to begin to turn. So we need to watch this ridge back off, and we're certainly going to be watching whether or not Isaias kind of creates some new thunderstorms over the next 12 to 18 hours over the warm waters of the Gulf Stream and the relaxation of the wind shear. I wouldn't be surprised if at 5 p.m. the new track shifts a little closer to the west and hurricane models begin to indicate a potential landfall somewhere along the eastern coast of Florida. Of course, we'll keep you updated on that, but trends are heading that way.
Hurricane specialist Brian Norcross and certified meteorologist Luke Doris, they have the latest information on Isaias. We're going to start with you, Luke.
Alex, all right, so 2 big headlines here. One is we now have tropical storm Isaias. Winds have come down to 70 miles per hour, so dropped 5 miles per hour from what it was at the previous advisory at 2 o'clock. And then the other one is the hurricane watch for Broward has been canceled. So it's tropical storm warning up and down Broward and Dade. So here's the latest cone, and the forecast does have it regaining Category 1 strength. That would be late tonight. That's 2 a.m. as it makes its closest approach to South Florida, which will be overnight tonight. The other thing that we notice here at the cone is now we have the left side, because we've had a left shift, you know, a weaker storm. We've been talking would want to favor more of the left side, and it has indeed adjusted more to the west. So the left side of the cone now is right on the line between Broward and Palm Beach. So that's an interesting adjustment there. And then the center of the forecast cone, where the center of the storm may be, makes a very close approach to the east coast of Florida as it moves northward through tomorrow and moves away from us. A lot of us right now not having that bad of weather. I mean, there's a big lull. We had a nasty squall come through at about 2 o'clock this afternoon, where we did see several reports of tropical storm force winds. I've seen as high as 50 miles per hour. But a lot of it's just a little bit breezy, and we have caught a break in the bands, and we'll see more of that as we go throughout the day, and especially this evening and tonight. So that was a rough one that we had go through, but much of us really just seeing a few showers come. Now the strongest ones, which will still pack pretty gusty winds, probably tropical storm force, 40 plus, Coral Springs and near Fort Lauderdale, but that's really about it. Take it down here into the extreme upper Keys, Key Largo, you're going to get some gusty showers there. But something that I see is this is the north side of the eye, and a lot of lightning right there, which sometimes in hurricanes and tropical systems can signal that there could be some intensification. Let's get Brian Norcross's thoughts on all this. Brian, we've been talking about a weaker storm having a better shot at getting closer to Dade and Broward, but the winds with that, of course, would go down. So it's kind of, you know, 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. Do we still expect the similar impacts as we've been talking about since maybe yesterday for Dade and Broward, or has that changed?
Well, I think we expect, you know, bottom line, similar impacts, tropical storm type winds now and then. The question was whether we were going to have some kind of sustained tropical storm force winds, and that doesn't look like that's going to happen. What it looks like will happen, though, the winds will increase, and then we'll have these occasional gusts. At Dania Beach Pier, there was a 59-mile-an-hour gust reported that the Hurricane Center passed along, and that's why they've actually expanded the area with potential tropical storm force winds in this latest advisory. All right, let's take a look at the advisory, or at the radar now. First of all, coming out of Nassau. Excuse me. I've been talking about this too much. Okay, here you see the center is over in here. It's probably down in here somewhere, actually. The question is whether these strong thunderstorms here can form closer to the center, and the thinking is as it gets up here over the Gulf Stream, maybe, in fact, it will, and that's why the Hurricane Center is saying that even though they've lowered it to tropical storm, hurricane hunters can't find any hurricane force winds that once it gets over the water. Indeed, seeing these thunderstorms blow up like that, there you see, look at it on the satellite, look at that there. Even though the center is down in here, that one that we're seeing on the radar, the Bahamian radar, really blowing up. So as this comes up in our general direction, probably not quite that steep an angle, something like that. The question is, how does this all fill in? And with the warm water, the super warm water of the Gulf Stream, is that enough energy really to kick it all back off together? Certainly, it has a strong enough circulation, so the mechanics are there. But we notice, look how you can draw a line right through there. Look at that. And look at this side of the line. It's all kind of, you see the dark. It's all dried out. It's like there's a big sponge over the left half of the circulation. And the right half of the circulation over the Bahamas, you have these big storms. Expectation is it's going to continue with that kind of structure, but maybe gets enough of these thunderstorms to develop near the center that indeed it kicks back up to a hurricane. That's the thinking. So in any case, it's throwing off these bands. We've had, as you know, some of them come through, as I said, one up to 59 miles an hour, and it just really depends on the structure of the band. As you said, some of them might have lightning in them, some are just stronger. They're kind of fighting against the dry air, but the dry air sometimes can actually make them locally stronger as they develop. So here's the new cone close up. The idea being that as it gets here, this is 2 o'clock in the morning, as it's somewhere off of the northern Broward, Palm Beach County coast, something like that, over the Gulf Stream with kind of maximum fuel for empowering it, but fighting the dry air and the unfavorable winds, keeping it down, that it gets back up to hurricane strength sometime later on tonight. The idea being, if it stays weak, as you say, Luke, it comes over here closer to us, but it's a weaker storm. So the bottom line is we continue with the threat of tropical storm force winds here. Then with this slightly shifted track, given the weaker storm, more of the Florida coast continues to be in the cone. In fact, it's more in the cone than it was. So if it does have hurricane force winds, they're going to come closer to the coast, so those hurricane warnings continue in effect there. Thinking is that the unfavorable upward winds will finally get it, and it'll be down to tropical storm strength there. So here's just timing it out for you. That because of the 59-mile-an-hour wind that they measured, they've extended the tropical storm force winds out. So the idea is they're right offshore here at 6 o'clock, and then moving on to the north. You see that the hurricane force gusts stay offshore here. The hurricane force winds are just a tiny little dot in there. They stay offshore of Dade and Broward, but then there's this opportunity for it to rebuild itself a little bit over the Gulf Stream. So that's why the hurricane warnings are all on the coast from the Palm Beaches to the north, as the hurricane force gusts, that's the orange, kick in. Tropical storm force gusts, or tropical storm force winds in general in the yellow, hurricane force gusts in the orange, hurricane force sustained in the red. So that's the bigger threat, certainly on up to the north. And look, it tracks right up the coast, thinking is it gets weaker. The models bring it a little, look at the models now. The consensus model brings it over the coast. So everything is shifted left with this weakening, just like we said. And the models have responded to that, and they still take it north, but as a slightly weaker storm than it was forecast earlier. So, Luke, it's kind of behaving like we thought it would. If it weakened, it would go a little left, but weaker. You know, we take weaker any day of the week, and we still don't really expect anything different than periods of gusty winds and kind of squally weather here, but more in periods than in any kind of continuous windy, dangerous situation.
Okay, Brian, thank you. It's those bands that we'll be watching for as we go through this evening. May see more and more of them, maybe a little bit closer frequency as it makes its closest approach, and still thinking that the worst of the weather would be this evening and tonight, and after we get past really late night, early tomorrow morning, it'll scoot up to the north, and our conditions will be improving at that point.
This is WPTV News Channel 5 at 6.
And right now at 6, continuing coverage as we track Isaias.
First, let's get right to First Alert Chief Meteorologist Steve Weigel with the very latest. Steve?
All right, Kelly and Michael, lots to talk about tonight. Of course, it's been downgraded to a tropical storm, but that is expected to be short-term and regenerate to a hurricane later this evening. Look at the thunderstorm activity and the large area convection that is fired up on the north side of this. Now, if you look at the infrared satellite loop, you're like, well, where is the center of the storm? It's located right in this area here, just to the south of this big plume of convection, and you can see it on the visible loop. This will be available until the sun sets tonight, so for the next couple of hours. But there's the center right there, and most of it's sunny. There's not a whole lot going on. There are gusty winds, obviously, but there's not much in the way of rainfall, and it's pretty quiet weather. But this is where we're seeing the activity and watching for the potential for this to kind of wrap around the center, not kind of, it will wrap around the center and protect it as it moves closer to our area. So that's a big reason why it's expected to develop back into a hurricane as it moves up over the open water of the Gulf Stream and the Florida Straits, and the outer bands are already starting to work into our area. We have seen 50 to 55 mile an hour wind gusts reported at many sensors now, not only on the Treasure Coast, but into Palm Beach County. And there are several big bands of rain coming in, one along West Palm, Palm Beach, all the way back through Wellington, tracking right along Southern Boulevard and Okeechobee.
This is Leo from North Andros Island on the Bahamas. The storm unleashing hurricane force winds and already devastating that area.
And the focus now shifts to Florida as the storm gets closer. This is a live look now at Deerfield Beach. Northeastern Broward County, including Pompano Beach, Deerfield Beach, and Lighthouse Point, are most at risk in our area. Fort Lauderdale and Miami are no longer in the cone of concern. Thanks for being with us. I'm Alina Machado.
And I'm Trina Robinson. Let's get right over to Chief Meteorologist John Morales. He's been tracking Isaias all day long. John.
Hi guys, good afternoon. Well, as you know, the weather has been variable across South Florida today. We've had, I would say, more sun than clouds. But of course, we've had a couple of good squall lines come through, the spiral bands on the outskirts of the system, providing wind gusts between 40 and 50 miles per hour. And Ryan will be talking about some of those local impacts in just a second. But let's discuss the symmetry of this system. It is not a very well-formed, well-defined tropical storm. It's pretty disheveled right now. It's got winds, tropical storm force winds that extend out 0 miles on the southwest quadrant, 0 miles. Then 35 miles on the southeast quadrant and 90 miles on the northern semicircle. So because it is like this, asymmetrical, where bad weather is on the north and east, but not so much on the southwest, well, as it slides towards the northwest, we probably will continue to see well, the weaker side, the inactive side of the system. Now, you look at the satellite picture and you're going to say, wait, where is this tropical storm? Today, it really struggled due to upper level wind shear and dry air. That's why the winds are down to 70 miles per hour. Frankly, you know, I know they have aircraft in there, but it sure doesn't look like a 70 mile an hour tropical storm at this hour, moving towards the northwest at 10 miles per hour. I'm going to show you again our in-house computer forecast model. There's the center midnight tonight. Just north of Bimini there, and then as we set this in motion over the next several hours, you'll see it well pass between Grand Bahama and the East Coast, and then get really close, possibly make landfall in Port St. Lucie later on Sunday as it heads towards the northwest. And that is what the National Hurricane Center is forecasting as you look at this 5 p.m. cone of concern as they've issued it. Notice that they do have it becoming a hurricane again, and then again getting very close to the coast between St. Lucie all the way up to the Space Coast.
Welcome back to the Weather Channel. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel. We're taking a pretty good gusty shower right now, tropical shower, not a squall like we had earlier this afternoon with a gust of almost 60 miles an hour. Behind me is the angry Atlantic, and you can see the waves crashing. 5 to 6 to 7 footers are going to continue to ramp up tonight as Isaias is likely to become a hurricane once again. It's a very strong tropical storm, 70-mile-an-hour winds. And keep in mind, there's really no difference between the impacts of a 70-mile-an-hour tropical storm and a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane. We stress that all the time. They have to draw the line somewhere. So, and Dr. Knabb will tell you that right now. Dr. Knabb, give us a little bit more insight on what you think is going to happen now that we see the convection blowing up and what the hurricane hunters are going to be seeing over the next few hours before that 11 p.m. advisory.
Well, I think we'll continue to see a strong tropical storm, and it just might become a hurricane somewhere in the next several hours. Then after tomorrow, it's on a downward trend, but a very gradual one. So we've got a potent tropical storm that's going to affect essentially the entire east coast of the U.S. and not just at the beaches, some inland areas as well. We have this big blow up of thunderstorms there northeast of the center. Now, I don't think, at least not yet, that the surface center is getting right underneath the convection there. It still seems to be a little bit lopsided, which is good news. We don't want this to just get vertically aligned and rapidly ramp back up. Doesn't look like that is happening or is going to happen, but the surface center you saw exposed right in there after it left Andros earlier is getting underneath the convection. But with the surface centers in here, and then the center of the blowup is over here, and that's what the radar is suggesting. It doesn't look like it's wrapping up a ring of convection that's really strong. It's a sheared tropical storm, and just north of Andros, that's where the strongest convection is. But you can see a lot of bands that are occasionally pretty potent are swirling around in there. I mean, you got a strong tropical storm here and really low pressure. So no matter what, in these outer bands, you're going to get some very brief, very squally weather. Now, this future radar based on a model depiction might not be exactly right, but look overnight tonight. Oh, this is going to get close. If this is right, this nasty north and northeast side of it's going to get very close to the coastline. Could get some very gusty winds right there on the beach. Maybe not as much as far inland. Freeport, Grand Bahama, probably going to be taking it on the chin. And then this whole mess just goes right up the east coast. So easily could have tropical storm conditions, maybe hurricane force gusts in some of those bands, especially on the north side.
Ready to be executing their plans, particularly if you're on the east coast of Florida. You should have 7 days of food, water, and medicine. Don't be fooled by the downgrade. We do think it will be upgraded back to a hurricane later on this evening.
And welcome back, everyone, for extended coverage of Isaias. I'm meteorologist Mike Bettish, joined by our storm specialist Mark Elliott. We'll be with you until 1 o'clock Eastern time to keep you up to date on what's happening with this system. Let's get you caught up on the latest headlines right now. Unfortunately, 2 deaths being blamed on Isaias, both in the Dominican Republic. A 5-year-old killed when a tree fell on him. A man also electrocuted there. In Florida, about 10,000 utility workers are pre-staging along the coast to repair power outages after the storm. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper says we all need to be prepared for the dangers Isaias could bring. Go to ncdps.gov/Isaias for the state's latest information there. But let's bring in Mark to talk a little bit more about what's going on with Isaias right now. It's had such a different personality today, and this most recent blow-up of convection's very interesting.
Yeah, gosh, conflicting signs coming out of this storm, really for the duration of the life of Isaias. So today was no exception in that way. We're still following some of those conflicting signs. If you were to just look at the enhanced satellite imagery that we have on here, and you're saying, okay, gosh, the center's up here, it's going due north, you'd be mistaken, because the low-level swirl that we can see before the sunset was actually exposed through much of the day. It's trying to rebury itself underneath some of that big blow-up of thunderstorms, but that's part of why we got that loss. We lost some of the wind speeds, right? It was just a sheared system without the storms right over the center. Now I think that center's going back under some of those thunderstorms, but it's still a very a struggling storm in that way because of the shear that's nearby. There is some strong wind aloft coming across the Florida peninsula. Hopefully, for many of you, it'll be enough wind to keep the worst of the weather just off the coast. But gosh, we're talking miles of difference here, that if it gets a little bit closer in, some of the worst of the weather will be right on shore. And the other factor that's been holding it back a little has been the dry air that wrapped into our storm. I don't think this is the be-all, end-all for this thing overall. It's kind of fought off those headwinds pretty darn well comparatively to some storms we've seen in our history. And so the point here is that getting back to hurricane strength is not off the table. Strong tropical storm, low hurricane, the impacts are very similar. And the impacts are going to be local, right? If you get one of these bands, it comes through and the winds pick up, or if it spins up a tornado, this will be a tropical system that you remember at your house forever. Or if those, worst of the impacts miss you by a street or two, you'll be like, what were they talking about? This was no big deal. It's going to be a big deal for someone. And so we hope that it's not your house, but you need to be ready for it. Right now, winds are modest in those squalls at Fort Lauderdale, gusting to 23. Mike, we'll see as those squalls continue to increase through the night, how those winds respond.
Yeah, Mark, good stuff there. Thank you.
Now let's talk about hour by hour when we can expect those winds. Basically in the morning, tropical downpours, very windy conditions, strong wind gusts after 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then very windy conditions throughout the evening hours. Now let's talk about the latest on Tropical Storm Isaias as of the 2 o'clock advisory, moving northwest at 8 miles per hour. So yes, it is slowing down this morning. Hopefully it doesn't slow down even more for the 5 o'clock advisory. It is weaker, 70-mile-per-hour winds out of the center, so that means that tropical storm force winds are actually right along the I-core and the northeast quadrant of the center. Notice that all the convection is on the east side of the center. Notice the west side is actually pretty dry because it is encountering very high wind shear and lots of dry air. I'll show you that in just a second. So here's the latest forecast track. In the next couple of hours, around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, National Hurricane Center is saying it has a window of opportunity that it could become a hurricane again right off our shore in West Palm Beach. Now, according to this track, it will track towards the north right along the coast of the Treasure Coast as a Category 1 hurricane. But we'll see what happens with the 5 o'clock advisory because the convection is getting better organized, but it's still not fully there yet. So we'll see what happens. Then on Sunday night, tonight, 75-mile-per-hour winds right along Melbourne, Daytona Beach as a tropical storm system. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, it will be tracking very quickly towards Raleigh, the North Carolina area, and then all the way up towards the Northeast and Boston, Washington on Tuesday and Wednesday. Computer models just updated. That was very interesting because it was showing that it will be making landfall near the Treasure Coast. So now the computer models are showing that it will ride up right along that coastline. But again, the tropical storm force winds are actually on the northeast side, but also it extends out 100 miles from the northwest. So we will be dealing with those tropical downpours that will be embedded with those tropical storm force winds anywhere between 39 to 55 miles per hour. Now, I do want to show you the intensity forecast. It looks like that it won't become a Category 1 hurricane. It will stay as a tropical storm system for the next couple of days. So we'll see what happens with the 5 o'clock advisory. I was talking about the dry air. Look at all that dry air near the west coast of Florida that is actually filtering into the rain bands of Isaias. But you see all that deep convection over the very warm waters. So it's a very tricky forecast. So we'll see what happens. Then the wind shear, pretty high on the west side of the center. So it is going to be fighting through wind shear, dry air, but then it has that environment. The sea surface temperatures are ranging anywhere between like 79 to 85 degrees over the Bahamas. Now here's the radar. Lots of deep convection on the northeast side. Freeport, Marsh Harbor, just getting pounded with lots of heavy rainfall, gusty winds, sustained winds over 39, 40 miles per hour. And it's about 65, 70 miles away from West Palm Beach, just to give you a perspective. Now, this center will continue to track towards the north. Now, also those rain bands will continue to increase as the day goes on. So just be aware of that. More rain in the next couple of hours. Right now, just tracking a couple of sprinkles, light showers from Stewart down into Jupiter Island. The Treasure Coast, it is dry. Jupiter down into Boca, just a few sprinkles out there, and just east of Canal Point and Belle Glade. Now let's do a recap before I go. So windy conditions, quick tropical downpours for today, possible storm surge. That will be the greatest impact, basically coastal impacts. So from Vero Beach down into Boca, it is going to be pretty messy out there because the center will be very close to our shoreline. So tropical storm force winds are possible pretty much all day along the coastline, and it will peak during high tides, minor beach erosion, and very rough seas. We're talking about wave heights anywhere between 5 to 20 feet right along the shore.
Moments ago, so our WPTV First Alert meteorologists have been looking at the data more closely in this last few minutes. What have you learned, Glenn?
Well, we've actually been reading up on it a lot, and the factors that we've been talking about for the past almost 24 hours now really played a huge role in the weakening of this storm. It was moving along at a pretty fast pace yesterday morning at this time. It seemed like it was going to maintain hurricane strength. At one point over the past couple of days, the official forecast actually had it increasing in strength to a Category 2 hurricane just for a short period of time. But then as we got into the day yesterday, winds started to pick up out of the southwest and created quite a bit of wind shear that were cutting into this storm. As it was trying to continue its counterclockwise circulation, those southwesterly winds were preventing it from really maintaining its strength. That with some drier air trying to mix in, and then it ran right over Andros here with the eye getting greatly disrupted by the land here of this island. And that really was kind of what created a situation where it started to weaken even faster. So the 5 a.m. update, and I'll show you the track in just a moment, but winds at 65 miles per hour. That's still a very strong tropical storm, but at this point, it looks like it's kind of running out of time to try to re-strengthen. It's starting to interact with mainland Florida now, and so as that happens and there's a lot of friction involved in the circulation, it's not likely that it's going to start to regenerate or re-strengthen very quickly. And so it looks like at this point it's going to stay a tropical storm. Let's move on, and I'll show you what's going on with the rainfall here, and Katia is going to take a closer look at Vipercast for today. You'll see it still has that closed center of circulation there, right to the northwest of Bimini. But we never saw that thunderstorm activity really tighten up around the center of the storm, which is always a sign that it's beginning to re-strengthen. And we talked about this a lot. Mike and Ashley and Katia and I talked about this throughout the morning so far, that we were watching to see these yellows and oranges here, these thunderstorms. We were watching to see if that kind of activity developed around the center. And when it wasn't doing that, it was a sign that it wasn't strengthening as quickly as it had enough time to do before it started to interact with land. So it continued to weaken. Now 65-mile-per-hour winds is what the hurricane hunters found. Here's that drier air right over top of Florida. That's what has been moving in and preventing this from strengthening a little bit as well. And then we've got that wind shear, which we talk about all the time. And wind shear are the winds that sort of move opposite of what the storm needs in order to strengthen. And those winds coming in out of the west and west-northwest and even southwest at times really cut into the circulation of this storm. They were coming in this direction here while the storm was trying to get winds going the other direction this way. And so as those two things were conflicting there, that caused the storm to weaken pretty quickly. Computer models are still very consistent that this moves right up along the coast, which means that we could most definitely see tropical storm conditions, especially right along the coast throughout the day today. So is it going to be a calm, sunny day? And no. It's still going to be a stormy day with some pretty heavy rain bands coming in and some very, very gusty winds. But the good news at this point in time is at least we're not looking at what could have potentially been hurricane force winds. Now, here's a look at the latest track from the National Hurricane Center, and you can see moving northwest at 9 miles per hour, winds at 65. By the time we get to 2 p.m. this afternoon, this is also a faster track than before. It's already made it up into Martin County and St. Lucie County on this track. That's pretty much more than halfway up through our viewing area, which means by the time we get to about 5, 6, 7 o'clock tonight, it's already headed up to the Space Coast, where it will end up during the overnight hours and then eventually moving off toward the Carolinas after that. So here are the basics. Here's the breakdown. Still fast, heavy rain bands. Still tropical storm conditions likely along the coast throughout the day today, and some gusty winds inland as well, but a shorter time frame from now through about 5 p.m. to maybe 6 or 7 p.m. before it clears our viewing area.
This is good practice because it is still a long way to go in hurricane season. We got the survival guide ready to go for you. You can download it on WPBF.com. Of course, check it out for free on our mobile app as well. A lot of different options for you.
Really good information there, and it's free. All right, we want to send things over to Sandra Shaw, and you are standing by with the National Hurricane Center to get some more information, Sandra.
That's right. Ken Graham here with me now. And Ken, we're starting to see things really deteriorate with the seas with some of our reporters that are right along the coastline. And I know you've seen it. That right side of the of what used to be the eye is just blowing up with lightning right now.
Yeah, it's an important point to make because, you know, it doesn't look solid. It's not your typical eye that you see closed together. But trust me, the winds are there, and I think that's what everyone's seeing there right on the beach. So if you think about it, I'm trying to draw this circle here. If you think about circle right around the center, you notice that the western part of that eye is right on the coast. So that's why you're getting some of the rain. And remember the last couple of days we were talking about little wiggles and wobbles do matter, because even if the main portion, even if the center is offshore, it's not just that center point. You have to draw a larger circle to really start seeing where those winds are. So yep, seeing that, you're going to see those rain bands. And remember, it's so important, even if when this passes by and moves to the north, you're still going to have those rain bands back behind it, and those could be real potent with winds and heavy rain.
Yeah, I mean, do you think we're going to see some tail impact? Is there a pretty long tail with this thing?
Yeah, looking at some of the modeling and even trying to look at the structure, sometimes Sandra, I gotta step back and really kind of look at it. But yeah, starting to see some of that structure down below, and that could impact the Bahamas as well. Even if this main band of rain moves out, you still got these tails of convection. Those are those rain bands. So when it moves north, these are going to move with it. So you're going to see some of those rain bands move, you know, south of that center as it moves northward. So that's something we got to watch out for, because some people think, well, this thing's past me, but watch out for those tail rain bands. They could have really high winds and heavy rainfall.
Yeah, it's not over till it's over. Okay, you showed me a cool map earlier, and this was, I think, from the Convective Storm Center, and it was talking about the risk for flash flooding up around South Carolina. Talk about that and why they're so vulnerable.
Yeah, you start thinking about where the system's going to go. And if you look at our forecast track, the center moving really close into South Carolina, right along the border of North Carolina. And then with time, think about the center moving northward. That's bringing all that tropical moisture from down here and moving that all up there through the mid-Atlantic up into the northeast. And as a result, you know, the Weather Prediction Center looking at it, you start looking at soil conditions, a moderate risk of flash flooding from portions of South Carolina into North Carolina and Virginia. And notice it's not just coastal. It's a big reminder for those folks, especially you know, people traveling from here going northward. It can be real dangerous on the roads. You can get some flash flooding. And I think the other thing that's really interesting, look how large this slight risk is in yellow of flash flooding. So any one of those areas could be dangerous. You know, turn around, don't drown. You don't want to get those automobiles anywhere near that water.
Yeah, it kills more than any other weather-related phenomenon, flooding. All right, Ken, talk about this season in general. I mean, we're here in August 2nd. We're on the 9th named storm. We've been talking about it's going to be exceptionally active. It has panned out. What are the factors that are yielding this result so far, and what do we have maybe on the horizon the next couple weeks?
Well, I think preparedness needs to continue. It looks to be continuing to be a busy season. Just looking on, you know, the African monsoon, you look at the satellite, you see those storms coming off of Africa, and which one's going to develop, which ones aren't. I mean, we're going to see those increase in development with time as we get through the season. So every indicator points to more storms, a busy season. So preparedness is going to have to be constant through this whole season. We're always going to be ready to go. Sometimes you get long lead times. I always talk about this. You know, these tropical systems don't care about your timeline. So sometimes you may get a nice week to prepare, other times you may get 2 days. So preparedness is everything, and it's going to be a busy season, and I think together we're going to definitely get through it.
Yeah, why don't they care about our chronology? I don't like that. Anyway, thanks a lot, Ken. We'll be talking to you later. All right, we're going to throw you all to a break right now, and we'll be back with more coverage after that.
Staging, just in case. I know here in Palm Beach County, over 2,000 customers without power so far this morning. Brevard County on Florida's Space Coast has put the Mathers Bridge under lockdown because of the weather conditions. And Florida's emergency officials say COVID testing sites on the state's east coast are closed and because of the tropical storm. And finally, Port Canaveral is also closed until further notice. And we hope that our weather conditions will be improving and things will get back open as we head on towards the beginning of this week. But this week, Dr. Postel will be kind of filled with a lot of Isaias, not only here in Florida, that's certainly for today, but eventually for the Northeast and New England.
Yeah, we can't let that story go away because, Paul, Florida will be getting brushed by Isaias today, and then the Carolinas, South and North Carolina, perhaps a more direct impact by later tomorrow or early Tuesday, and then the Northeast by midweek. Everybody's going to get in on it in some way or another. 65 mile per hour on the wind speed. That's what the most recent advisory has it set at. That was at 8 a.m. this morning. There will be a new update, a new advisory coming in by, let's say, 10:45 or so, with the movement now north-northwest at 8 miles per hour. Now, notice there's a westward component of motion, so the center of circulation is still probably getting a little closer to the coast, although it's a tough one to call here. What we're looking at, though, on the radar, that's not where the center of circulation is. This out here is a mid-level vortex. It is at about 15,000 feet up or so, spiraling around. That's where the heaviest thunderstorms are. The low-level circulation is, well, it's hard to tell on this one. It's probably out over here, say 20 to 30 or 40 miles or so off the coast of Florida, with not a whole lot of thunderstorm activity near or on top of that low-level vortex. And that sort of disheveled or disjointed nature of it is going to likely prevent the intensification. You need to have those two line up in order for this to strengthen in the near term. But we are still seeing some significant winds along the coast. Now, in between the rain bands, we are going to see maybe, conditions that are not particularly unmanageable. But when those rain showers roll in off the Atlantic, we are likely to see wind gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour, which is what we've seen pretty much all morning long. Look at this flare-up of convection. We saw this last night. That kind of fell apart. We're seeing a new one. This one will probably fall apart too, but it's all part of this process to let us know that Isaias is just off the coast. Most of the cloud underneath here is not precipitating. Most of the rain and heavy thunderstorms are along and to the east of where the center is, like that. This is where the strongest winds are with Isaias, and that will continue to be rolling up the coast like this along the Florida shoreline, with the center probably remaining just offshore, as will likely most of the bad weather. But again, there will be showers rolling in, bringing 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts throughout the day tonight and into tomorrow. And then the story shifts northward from there. I got to get to that, Paul, but I'll send it back to you first.
Well, I think certainly along the Space Coast, just because of the way that it sticks out, we're going to be seeing more wind. We've been looking at winds gusting in the middle 40s from time to time near there, and that's probably just going to continue to step up a little bit through tonight, especially as we get some bands coming through. There's some pretty strong wind that's just offshore, and some of that, if some of those rain bands continue to reach onshore, is going to be brought down to the ground. So 65 mile per hour storm right now. It's moving to the north-northwest at 9 miles per hour. Here's the forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. It's expected to remain just offshore until late tomorrow, and then it is going to come into the Carolinas, and so that is dramatically going to step up impacts along the coast. We're going to be looking at very strong wind, surge values of 2 to 4 feet from Edisto all the way up to Cape Fear, and then beyond that, heavy rain well inland into Raleigh, North Carolina, and then perhaps targeting the major metros in the Northeast as well. You look at the satellite presentation, really different as compared to yesterday. We've got a lot more in the way of deep convection, but it is not co-located with the center of circulation. We are seeing some pretty strong winds near that center and out to the east, but a real lack of thunderstorms near that center. So one of the questions is, this weather that is located north and east of the center, is some of that going to make its way over and into the coast? And some of the modeling showing that getting a little bit closer going through the night tonight. So where we see that, where we see more significant rain bands coming through, that certainly is going to step up the potential for heavy rains. Looking at this model forecast going forward, you see that's just offshore relative to the Space Coast. And again, as the storm continues to move north, could get more organized before it moves up towards the Carolinas. Right now, we want to go to the director of the National Hurricane Center, Ken Graham. And Ken, as we were saying last hour, really, really important not to dismiss this storm because it's a tropical storm. I mean, when you look at history, some of the very worst storms that we've seen in this country country have been tropical storms.
Yeah, definitely, Carl. No such thing as just a tropical storm. I mean, these things could produce all the rainfall and the storm surge. We got to talk about all the different aspects of the impacts. That's what's going to happen here. I mean, it doesn't even look like the typical storm, but we don't want people to let their guard down. That little tilt, you were mentioning it, Carl, the shear, just a little bit of a tilt where the low-level circulation and the upper-level circulation are displaced. But all of this is going to be moving northward. The Carolinas through the northeast U.S. are going to see some impacts from this storm.
And you've got a lot of low-lying terrain there in the Carolinas, and tomorrow night a strong tropical storm coming in, just a shade away from being a hurricane. And the way that it's going to be coming in, we could be looking at some significant surge with that high tide tomorrow evening.
Yeah, absolutely. We're doing those calculations, looking at those numbers, and all this is moving northward. So 8 p.m. Monday, reaching the South Carolina coast and then moving inland through the day Tuesday. So that's what we're looking at. Going to have that rainfall and really looking at the rain and the storm surge, just really looking at inland places, not just coastal, but inland places getting some of that rain. But as you mentioned, Carl, that the storm surge, look at some of these values. I mean, the water gets trapped in these concave areas, the shape of the coastline. The water comes in, the wind blows it in, it gets trapped 2 to 4 feet in some of these areas. Not every area, the barrier islands and also areas on the other side of the barrier islands. When you have the wind shift, sometimes you actually see the wind blowing some of that water from the opposite direction as well after the storm passes. So those are the little details. You got to listen to those local officials and really keep yourself safe on these barrier islands and also inland.
All right, Ken Graham, Director of the National Hurricane Center. Thank you, sir, for your expertise. We certainly do appreciate it.
Live, local, late breaking. WPBF 25 News at 6 starts now.
Right now at 6, all advisories from the Palm Beaches to the Treasure Coast are now lifted as Tropical Storm Isaias makes its way up the coast of Florida and beyond.
Earlier today, hurricane hunters flew right through the storm off the east coast of Florida. Strong winds brought down trees and power lines across South Florida. Good evening. I'm Felicia Rodriguez.
I'm Todd McDermott. Thank you for joining us. The Palm Beaches are in the clear. The Treasure Coast will still feel the wind and get some rain for the next few hours. We want you to know that even though we have ended our 32 hours of continuous coverage, we are monitoring the storm all day and all night.
We have live team coverage. Ari Height and Anna Espinoza are live in Hope Sound and Vero Beach with the conditions there in just moments.
We also have first warning team weather coverage. We'll go to meteorologist Brooke Silverang in a moment. First, severe weather expert Mike Lyons has the latest on Isaias. Mike?
And let's begin with the great news, and that is that the storm system is now officially out of our viewing area, just past east of Brevard County. It's about due east of Palm Bay and continuing to move away. And as Todd and Felicia pointed out, all of the warnings have now been discontinued. Most of the afternoon, the Treasure Coast was under a tropical storm warning that has now been discontinued. The storm continuing to move away. So we're done with the storm. However, the story is far from written. It is moving north, headed for the Carolinas, where now a hurricane watch is in effect. We'll talk more about the impact here in just a second. Right now, here's the latest advisory. Winds are 70, and the storm moving at a steady pace now, north-northwest at 9. And here's that track, and you can see how close the center of that storm came to the Palm Beaches and the Treasure Coast. We saw some wind, some rain, a lot of cloud cover, but thankfully nothing really significant, and certainly not a landfall from a hurricane. The wind shear kept the storm from getting too much stronger than it was earlier yesterday. Here we are late tonight, just east of Daytona Beach. After that, the storm begins its turn to the northeast. It should remain offshore of Florida, as you can see. By 2 p.m. tomorrow, still a tropical storm, although there's that chance that it could intensify back into a hurricane again, especially as it heads for the Carolinas. You can see a lot of concern here. Later in the broadcast, we'll talk to Ken Graham, the director of the Hurricane Center, about the concerns for the Carolinas. After that, the storm moves up the east coast. This system will impact in some way just about every state along the eastern seaboard and perhaps even the Canadian provinces up in the northeastern part of the United States and up into the Canadian Maritimes as well. But again, for us, the threat finally is over. So let's look back and see how much rain, the gusty winds that we dealt with today. Let's bring in meteorologist Brooke Silverang with a look at how high those winds turned out to be.
Well, we got our tropical storm force winds here, Mike. We saw 53 at the airport, even Lake Worth Pier, 52-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So these are the strongest winds taken over a period of time. We even saw 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts in Jensen Beach, Lake Worth 48. So these are pretty high numbers, all tropical storm force winds that we did see across the Treasure Coast and even across the Palm Beaches. As for rain, we did see some heavy downpours at times. Here's some of the numbers, some rough estimates we did get around Hope Sound, 1.5 inches, Stewart, a little bit over 1 inch, and just up to 1 inch throughout most neighborhoods. So again, we saw the rain, the heavy winds, and also still dealing with some incoming shower activity. So let me pull up the radar so you can see what we're looking at. We have the system right here, well offshore. I want you to notice something though. Look at all that rain on the eastern half. So it is very lopsided because we're not seeing a lot on the other side. Normally when you see a textbook hurricane, you have rain all around. So we are noticing some dry air coming in from the west still. And as we get another look at some of our rain areas, looking pretty dry on the Palm Beaches, of course, but as we take a view up to the north, we do have a few showers still coming in along the Treasure Coast, south of Vero Beach. We have some light rain over you. Fort Pierce, some light rain still working its way off to the southwest. Even Stewart sitting in a very light drizzle. So a lot of the heavy rain and storm activity still well offshore, all in association with Isaias. And over the past couple of hours, there was a lot more lightning, a lot more thunder activity well offshore from us. And we can see that we are watching some very frequent lightning, the very heaviest of rains way away from our coastal areas. So at a point today, we did see the storm about 30 miles away from West Palm Beach. Now it's about 102 miles off to the northeast of us here down in West Palm. That's a quick check on your weather there.
The very torrential rain that could fall in places like Charleston and Myrtle Beach, and then going inland into places like Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the biggest concern that I have out of this system. All the models agree on this. Look at this. I mean, it's not just who gets what exact rainfall amount at one point, but it's the volume of water that could fall. So even if it's going to be moving at 15, 17 miles an hour, that doesn't mean it can't dump a lot of rain very, very quickly. Now, fortunately for Florida, the heaviest rain, the strongest winds are offshore. The center circulation's in here. And on the other side of the center, in the sheared tropical storm, that's where the strongest winds are. The aircraft haven't recently found anything that corresponds to 70 miles an hour. It's a strong tropical storm, and that's what we expect it to be at landfall. Here's the long visible loop, and if we switch over to that infrared here after dark here, you can see how there's some overshooting tops from the thunderstorms near Tampa from earlier. Which way are they going? This way. And that's the direction in which the storm is sheared. So that's what we think will keep it from becoming a hurricane, even though there's not a 0% chance of that happening. Look at all that lightning. And this is becoming more and more north loaded. So eventually the rainfall is going to make its way onto the north side, even the west side, as it comes ashore in South Carolina or North Carolina late tonight or early tomorrow morning. The weather will go downhill in South Carolina during the day tomorrow. It will remain a potent tropical storm as it goes over Hampton Roads, big cities of the Northeast, and New England. So it's not going to go away, okay? And this is not going to be a brush by like Florida. This is going to be coming inland. It'll definitely go over North Carolina. It will definitely go over New England. And again, winds of tropical storm force arriving in Charleston by this time tomorrow, maybe even a little bit sooner.
Weather Nation is where you are. We're getting into Monday morning now in many cases across the country. Now on Sunday to finish this weekend, Pompano Beach, Florida is one of the spots where some outer bands have been found. You can find humidity. All this from Isaias, but there's not a big noticeable wind with it here. You don't really see many trees blowing through, but you do see some storms. There's some churning surf, and that's maybe a little bit more notable that you got something out to sea. Usually the Atlantic side of our United States, the ocean's a bit more calm compared to the Pacific, and you don't have the high surf that maybe the Pacific might on average have comparatively. So we got storms in action. It's about Isaias and the midnight updates in the Mountain Time Zone, or 2 a.m. in the Eastern Time Zone. You could even put that 11 o'clock in the Western Time Zone, depending where you are. This is the latest from the National Hurricane Center. I'm meteorologist Stephen Lucy with you. This is still a tropical storm. Max sustained winds, that's a wind average over 1 minute, 70 miles per hour. Could be higher gusts than it. Looks to be the center of the storm is now moving north at least the line parallel that would go into shore to Orlando, Florida. So we're getting closer to Jacksonville, Florida. Overnight hours making some northward progress. There is still, and this has been a trend over about 12 hours, just north-northwest movement, a little creep north-northwest at 9 miles per hour. Barometric pressure holding steady from the latest update 3 hours before this one at 995 millibars in the central course pressure. Right now, here's a look at all the watches and warnings all together in one. What you're not finding here are hurricane watches still in effect. We're going to get to this. Let's put just the warnings on for you. Warnings that extend north of Vero Beach now. We've gotten rid of the southern extent of the tropical storm warnings in Florida. That's why Vero Beach is not under any warning or any advisory right now. Just off of Orlando, you're still in a tropical storm warning. And then you go up to Norfolk. That's Hampton Roads in Virginia. You go up to the Chesapeake Bay. Eastern Shore of Maryland, Rehoboth, even Ocean City. You're looking for at least there in the way of tropical storm warnings that are now in effect for you. There are still some tropical storm watches in yellow. When you get to Raleigh, North Carolina, there's just a difference between what track exactly Isaias is going to take. Maybe in some landfall, you'd be on the cusp of some winds that could be tropical storm status. We do feel as you go into the tidal Potomac, Washington, D.C. metro, farther north, in through Baltimore, in through Philadelphia, New York City, even into Connecticut to Rhode Island, there's tropical storm possibilities of wind force coming into those areas. So you're under a tropical storm watch as of right now. Again, a watch means we're just keeping an eye to the sky. We're keeping watch what can happen down the road, a little further down the road. But as we go into a warning, it means things are imminent or already happening. So a watch means we're still in kind of a wait and see kind of a category. Latest forecast fans show that track that maybe still has Wilmington right in line with landfall. This could still keep tropical storm status all the way through New York City in the National Hurricane Center's forecast, maybe all the way up into Maine to Canada, being a tropical storm. That means sustained winds there at 40 miles per hour. You got to be over 35, I believe, 39 miles per hour, around that range to be a tropical storm. But this would be amazing if it would keep characteristics all the way through the United States and not becoming a cold core system is another way to say this, and not truly a warm core tropical system, and then remnants or depressions until it gets to Canada. That would be a very, very long-lived storm. To compare that actual track for the National Hurricane Center, we're looking for the clusters of lines. These are different computer forecasts for the track. When you see all those lines on top of each other, it's a pretty consistent forecast to show that that's probably the likeliest outcome.
So speaking of talking about the tropics, Isaias, you heard me mention to the north of us, and there's another area we're watching just north of Puerto Rico. 5 advisory is in on Isaias. It is headed towards the Carolina coastline, possibly making landfall as a tropical storm or maybe a hurricane. It's in between those two strengths from 75 miles per hour to 70 miles per hour as we go into this evening and tomorrow morning. Otherwise, this new area has a 60% chance of development in the next 5 days. More in your forecast. I've got it coming up.
And tropical storm Isaias spinning off the Florida coast this morning. Look at it right there. Expected to strengthen back into a hurricane today before making landfall in the Carolinas. Now, northeast Florida, not out of the woods yet. We are dealing with some gusty winds. I've been taking wind observations. They actually just got stronger. I just got up to 20-mile-an-hour winds, and that is right along the coast here. Over 50-mile-per-hour gusts around Cape Canaveral, battering this boat against a seawall. That's rough right there. And big waves making for extremely dangerous conditions at the beach, something we will continue to see as this goes all the way up the East Coast. Welcome back into the show. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams live in Jacksonville Beach for you this morning. As we see, this storm is just 95 miles offshore from me. And what's really interesting is you can see how dry it is. Look at the dry air. I mean, you have blue skies and sunshine on the west side of this storm, yet look at the surf. It is rough. It is high. White caps out as far as the eye can see. Let's talk about what we know the very latest here with Isaias at this hour. Beaches across central and north Florida are closed this morning as red flags fly, warning people to stay out of the water. The Virginia National Guard says it has mobilized dozens of people to be stationed along the eastern shore to help respond to potential impacts from Isaias. The DOT in North Carolina says it's evacuated more than 3,300 people off Ocracoke Island ahead of the storm's arrival. And city officials in Baltimore are now handing out sandbags to residents on first-come, first-served basis as the city prepares for the very real potential of flooding from Isaias. So what is the very latest? We had a 5 o'clock update. We will get an intermediate update at 8 a.m. and then a full update at 11 a.m. The latest has it as a tropical storm at 70 miles an hour. Now, there's not much difference between 70 and 75 miles an hour, which would be hurricane strength, but I know just hearing tropical storm versus hurricane, it really kind of perks everyone up. But we are going to feel the effects from this system coming in as we head into the overnight hours and early tomorrow morning. So if you live in South Carolina, North Carolina, not only at the coast but inland, you really have to pay attention to this system, because this afternoon into this evening, those winds are going to pick up. Remember, the winds are about 125 miles from the center of the system, the tropical storm force winds, and you have the wind that's pushing the water. That's what's kicking up the surf behind me. We're going towards high tide right now. That's why we see that water high on Jacksonville beaches here, but 3 to 5 foot surge there from Myrtle Beach, Charleston, even 2 to 4 foot surge, and that extends up towards the mid-Atlantic, where we could see that surge 1 to 3 feet. Satellite radar shows we're already seeing the clouds and the rain moving ashore here into the Carolinas. Listen, this thing stretches from Florida all the way off into the Outer Banks, but it's going to get picked up by a trough, and I want to show it to you here. So I need you to pay close attention. It's pretty easy to find, but I want to point it out from you. Look at the winds coming down from Missouri on our water vapor here, and then coming up, basically Alabama, Mississippi, all the way into the northeast. That is our trough that is going to pick up Isaias and take it into the northeast. Real big trough there, and that's a lifting mechanism. And so it can squeeze out all that tropical moisture from this system, and that's why we're going to see inland flooding as a big issue. And Jen, just a little fun fact about hurricanes. I know you and I have talked about this in the past. Hurricanes, in fact, have very small rain droplets because they don't typically start as snowflakes, because hurricanes are warm throughout. Right. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to have any more or less rain necessarily, but it's just a fun fact that they have smaller raindrops than, say, your typical front coming through, because their moisture starts as, you know, snow or hail for that matter.
Exactly, and people always think, oh, a tropical rain, it must be like a big tropical raindrop. No, it's just a lot of them. It's just a lot of them, that's for sure.
Tropical storm Isaias as we look again towards the Viper radar. So here's what we have going on. We do have Myrtle Beach, where Will Nunley is stationed. As he mentioned, we have that dry pocket. There have been some showers, and there are some outer bands that are going to be working their way through this area, and we'll have to watch some of those outer bands, because not only are we going to be dealing with the angrier surf, the storm surge, the flooding concerns because of the heavy rain that is going to be moving onshore, but the possibility of even some tornadoes. You get these outer bands that are going to naturally want to spin, just because this is a naturally spinning system, and so we can see some water spouts. We could see that chance for just some tornadoes to develop and embed themselves within this. The center of the storm, though, is still about here. It has picked up speed since this morning. It's moving due north at about 13 miles per hour, and all of the widespread activity is on that northern side. So as that starts to push onshore, we're going to see more impacts being felt, especially in the inland areas. And so we'll be following that forecast on top of an upper level trough that's giving us some flooding concerns already into the mountains. This trough that's setting up about here is going to help drive the heavy rain threat. It's going to drive this system along the coastline. So it's going to be bringing tropical storm force impacts all along the I-95 corridor. As we take you out to Charleston, South Carolina, you can see yesterday the clouds starting to build in. Still, this is almost the calm before the storm, you could call it, because the surf isn't as angry as it is this morning, or what it's going to be later on this afternoon, Matt.
Yeah, that's the High Battery right there, East Bay Street. Of course, that's the harbor where the Cooper and the Ashley River meet. And if you look way out, we'll let this run one more time. That's actually historic Fort Sumter way out on the point of the harbor there. So that's about to all churn up here in Charleston over the next few hours here as the storm comes very close to the South Carolina low country. Right now the winds are at 70 miles per hour. Movement has actually picked up a little bit now north at 13 miles per hour. Jacksonville's here. There's the center of the storm, about 100 miles off the coastline. Yesterday it was about 40 to 50 miles off the Florida coastline, and it was definitely bringing in a lot of rain across Florida. Florida right now is hardly seeing anything, but if you look out across South Carolina, North Carolina, even coastal Georgia, that's where the wind and the rain are really going to start picking up. Tropical storm warnings are in effect now from northern Florida all the way up to Long Island, south shores of Connecticut, including New York City. Under tropical storm warnings, hurricane warnings are right here between Wilmington and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And then north of Long Island Sound and southern Connecticut around Greenwich, you start picking up tropical storm watches for the rest of Connecticut, all of Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Islets, the Cape, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, clear up through New Hampshire, in through Maine, and also look right in here. These are major metropolitan areas, D.C., Baltimore, Trenton, New Jersey, Philadelphia, all the way in through Westchester County and upstate New York. Those are all under tropical storm watches. So millions of people either under tropical storm warnings, watches, or hurricane warnings right now. As we move up the Carolina coastline, Charleston, it's already started there through tonight. We're going to see gusty winds 40 to 60 miles per hour, gusting up to 75, storm surge 2 to 4 feet, and then the rain's going to be an issue too, between 4 and 8 inches. If we get that much rain in downtown Charleston, the market area will flood, I assure you. Now, north of that, Wilmington, North Carolina, scattered showers and storms. They're really going to start picking up here, and then the winds will pick up too. 50 to 65, gusting over 80 miles per hour. Storm surge 2 to 4 feet, and the heavy rain, just like Charleston, 4, 6, maybe 8 inches of rain. That's all coming in later on today, overnight tonight, throughout the wee hours tomorrow morning, and then the storm will continue to work up into towns like Richmond, Virginia. Winds there 40 to 50, gusting upwards of 60 miles per hour. It's going to be quite a day tomorrow in Richmond.
Jackie?
Yeah, Paul, always scary and more dangerous at nighttime when people can't see, and it's going to be a tough night for folks to get any sleep whatsoever. So, Paul, you were just talking about how you're seeing a little bit of clearing there, and we're seeing that on the satellite imagery right now as well. So let's go ahead and show you the area that we're talking about. Right in there, underneath the N in Savannah on our graphic is where Tybee Island is, and you can see that sharp contrast between some of the cloud cover and then just kind of scattered clouds back behind that. So you will see improving conditions, certainly in terms of the sky cover. But look at this big burst right over here towards Charleston. Conditions are going downhill here now already, and some of the strongest winds that have been holding offshore the entire storm up to this point are now beginning to work their way on land. And you can be prepared to start to see those winds be, tropical storm force easy, 40, 50 plus mile per hour wind gusts are going to start bearing down into some of the coastal areas. Maximum winds still 70 miles per hour. We've seen some fluctuations in the thunderstorm flare-ups today, and we are watching those inching their way towards the coast now. So here's a look at the radar. Notice all the lightning too, by the way. A lot of that has been offshore, but now we're starting to see that sneak up just to the north of the Charleston area. I want to take you in here to Folly Beach. Here's Charleston, and Folly Beach has already recorded a 46 mile per hour wind gust. That was at the pier about an hour ago. But now as this banding begins to push in between Folly Beach and Charleston, you can expect to see some wind gusts here as much as 50 miles per hour. So you do not want to be out any longer into the Folly Beach area, into the Charleston area as that continues to push on in. Our storm is moving quickly, and we are expecting landfall later on tonight. In fact, this could happen 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock tonight, depending if it takes a little bit more of that inside track or if just kind of sneaks on the outside of that track. But not a lot of wiggle room left with this, but still the chance that this could become a hurricane before landfall. Not a huge difference between a Category 1 and a very strong tropical storm. Our impacts ultimately will end up being the same, and you're really going to be taking it on the chin right in this area of South Carolina, North Carolina, where the state lines come together. You're going to have it all, especially at the coast, with that surge, with the strong winds. Flash flooding ultimately will likely be a concern. We're going to have more on the flash flood risk and time it out for some of your cities in just a second. But Jeff, we've got an invest out in the Atlantic as well. It just keeps on rolling.
Yeah, of course we do. I mean, what else would we have here in 2020 in this very active tropical season? Invest 94L. This would be the 11th tropical depression if it were to form, and 9 of those have gone on to become named systems like Isaias. That's Isaias over here by the coast. This is the new Invest 94L, and the Hurricane Center gives it about a 60% chance of developing here over the next 5 days or so. If it does so, it would be in this zone well off the East Coast, but not that far away from Bermuda. Nothing to worry about right now. It looks like it may stall out here, but we'll keep an eye on it throughout the rest of the week.
Well, for the first time since Hurricane Donna back in 1960, a tropical system responsible for watches along the entire length of the East Coast. Hello, everyone. Welcome into our extended live coverage of Isaias. I'm Mike Bettis.
I'm Alex Wilson. Yeah, before all is said and done, Isaias could have affected all 14 coastal states from Florida up to Maine. Now tonight, North and South Carolina going to get in, Mike, on that full force.
Yeah, let's take you to a live look at what's going on there right now and show you what's happening in Myrtle Beach, Kiowa Island, Kill Devil Hills in North Carolina, up into Hampton Roads here in Norfolk, Virginia. Conditions deteriorate and deteriorate quickly as we go overnight tonight. The new advisory came in at the top of the hour, still maintains the strength of Isaias at a 70-mile-per-hour, very intense tropical storm. We're on the precipice here of a hurricane, and it may indeed become a hurricane before landfall tonight. Pressure holding steady as well, about 993, north-northeast movement now at 16, so slight turn in direction, also acceleration here up to 16 miles per hour. Location 115 miles south of Charleston, South Carolina. It may skim very close to Charleston or maybe just off to your north there. Myrtle Beach might be a landfall potential, somewhere maybe between Myrtle Beach and Wilmington, North Carolina tonight. You can see it on the satellite imagery, a blow-up of convection with storms coming into South Carolina, into North Carolina. And the next system, there it is right there. We've got a boundary right in there that's actually going to pick this up and push it and then accelerate it off to the east and northeast. You can see the two that are on a collision course right now. This one pushing in this direction, Isaias going in this direction. When the two meet, they push in tandem here off into the northeast. This is why the I-95 corridor is at risk through the night tonight and then all day long tomorrow. Look at the storms that are already flaring here, including a lot of stormy weather for us in North Carolina. On the northern side of Isaias, we've got convective thunderstorms blowing up around Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. We're just setting the stage then for what could come in with Isaias that may then lead to some flooding. So the storms we're getting now is not a good setup. You can see the spin sits right in here. There's the next system. That's the steering component. This is what we've been watching for days. That'll eventually pick up Isaias and push it. In the meantime, very strong storms in Atlanta. Reports of flooding and damage there. Those storms about to roll into the upstate. Let's get you right into the coastline here from Georgetown, Myrtle Beach to Wilmington. We've got a tornado watch in effect. If there weren't a whole bunch of other things to worry about, now we've got tornadoes to worry about with a right front quadrant hit that comes in as the motion of the storm brings in the air like this. You get some interaction with land, and you could have the spin up of brief tornadoes here that watch until 2 o'clock in the morning. Much improved conditions from Jacksonville up towards, say, Savannah. The winds are now offshore for you right now, but still gusty. A buoy offshore here, 34 miles per hour as we come up into the coastline. Look at the winds. Look where they're going now, all onshore. We're pushing the water in there, and the winds will start to pick up in intensity as the center gets closer and closer to land. Alex? Breaking news as we now have a hurricane on our hands. The National Hurricane Center with the newest advisory pegging Isaias' winds at 75 miles per hour, fishing making a Category 1 hurricane, and we're literally just hours away from a landfall in the Carolinas tonight. Pressure's also dropped a good bit here since the last advisory. A 5 millibar pressure drop here. So as the pressure's dropping, that means it's strengthening. The winds then correspondingly going up here. North-northeast movement is 16. So the forward speed has remained the same, and it's moving pretty good here, folks, and moving off to the north-northeast here. But basically, the northern or northwest eye wall is now touching land in essence. Look at the track of this, taking it right up into New England. Likely going to see the winds come down once it starts really interacting with land. It hasn't had a lot of interaction with land so far, but we're literally just hours away from the landfall, and so we've kind of maximized the winds, I think, up to this point. I don't think they're really likely to get much stronger than this, with a landfall happening in the next maybe 3 or 4 hours here. But notice where this goes, right through eastern North Carolina, through the Hampton Roads area, across Chesapeake Bay, through the Delmarva, right up through New Jersey, could potentially come right over top of New York and then right into New England. We still have hurricane warnings in effect here, Myrtle Beach to Wilmington. That right there is likely going to be the landfall location here. Tropical storm warnings highlighted in red to go all the way up the coastline here. In fact, all the way up into coastal Maine, with watches in effect here, portions of northern New Hampshire and then northern Maine. What this means is anticipate tropical storm force winds anywhere between 39 and 74 miles an hour, okay? I'm going to loop this radar for you for 3 hours here, okay? And what you'll see at the initial part of this is kind of an obscured center, but then notice how more of an eye starts to form here. And so signs that we had just enough strengthening here, and the strongest winds were actually found on the southwest side of the storm, not actually in the northern side, but the hurricane hunters are still in there right now. But I'm really concerned about some of these outer bands in here. Notice we've got a tornado warning happening for us now in North Carolina, and then the strong thunderstorms coming up across the I-95 corridor. All this is going to add to some of the intense wind that we see. I want to go ahead and go back to the tornado warning if we can and get in on that. That's just outside of Wilmington here. Tornado warning force around Southport. This is right near Highway 17. This is Brunswick County in North Carolina. Boiling Springs Lakes, Oak Island, Town Creek. These are all places where you need to take shelter. Could have a brief tornado spin up for us here. I think it might be right offshore here. Right down in here is where we may actually have a little spin on the radar. We could be looking at a water spout that might be coming onshore for us tonight. Radar's not that far away, so I think we're getting a pretty good look at it here. It could be three different spins there, and there. All right, so be prepared for some of these stronger bands, and this is going to be probably one of the stronger bands that we see with this spin in. They're not going to come right in, but notice the trajectory of these things, following along with the general motion of the band as well. So they'll be moving off to the north and west here. So Southport over to our Holden Beach. We urge you to take shelter quickly as there are possible tornadoes coming in with these squall lines here this evening.
Yeah, Charles, we've been seeing that too as well. And you know, the thing about it is sometimes we talk to several people who say, you know, we've been here, we've been through hurricanes and stuff. It's just a Category 1. And earlier, of course, it was a tropical storm. But the thing about Isaias and the storm surge is the way it's kind of approaching the coast and riding along near the coast. We have several hours of that onshore wind, which leads to the storm surge, inundation problems, and of course, flooding is one of the biggest killers when you're talking about these tropical systems, one of the biggest dangers. So that's why we want you to just be cognizant. Latest update, of course, I just saw they're saying that maybe 85-mile-per-hour winds from Isaias, so strengthening as it is approaching the coast. Now, I would expect we're going to see it make landfall within the next couple hours, and then we'll see some weakening as it interacts with land. But for now, the strengthening is certainly possible, and we are going to definitely continue to see this weather deteriorating as we head through the night tonight. So, Dr. Nab, you know, we're just kind of edging into the worst of the weather, but I'd say especially for places like Myrtle Beach, you've got a couple more hours of it worsening before it gets better.
Yes, and like you said, we're an hour or two away from landfall of the center of circulation somewhere near the South Carolina, North Carolina border. But again, landfall is just the beginning. 85-mile-per-hour Category 1 hurricane. It's moving a little more quickly, north-northeast at 18, but look how low that pressure is, 988 millibars. So that's going to be a strong tropical storm moving through the mid-Atlantic and northeast, because a system with that low pressure is not just going to go away. So here's the center of circulation right about in here. Here's the North Carolina, South Carolina border moving in that general direction. But a lot of the weather is already onshore. A lot of heavy rain. We've had a couple of tornado warnings earlier in the Wilmington, North Carolina area. We've shown you the storm surge flooding here in the Myrtle Beach area. And we've got very strong gusty winds. North Myrtle Beach recently gusted to 38. Wilmington gusted to 39 a little while ago. They gusted to 51. Georgetown, South Carolina on the southwest and west side of the system gusting to 46, even coming off the land. So even if the sustained winds are below tropical storm force in some spots, you're gusting to tropical storm force. And I wanted to give you the lay of the land for what's about to happen inland. Okay, we're getting close to landfall. Don't think, oh, okay, this is over. Look, it's just beginning. Look at that huge shield of rainfall in North Carolina. There's a lot of kind of predecessor rainfall here before the true circulation of the hurricane gets in there.
Guys, in our continuing coverage of Isaias from Wrightsville Beach in North Carolina here, just kind of watching some of the observations and the things that are going on earlier on. Excuse me, wind gusted Oak Island at 91 miles an hour. But what's really been interesting is watching that velocity field on the radar now come up through Carolina and Curry. It has come down, thank goodness. So we're seeing more like 50 and 60 at about 1,500 feet off the ground. And where the radar is in Charlotte, there are virtually calm winds right now and fog being reported. So they're probably in part of that eye wall. We have not had, to the best of my knowledge, an official landfall yet, but we are close. Is it going to be Holden Beach? Is it going to be Oak Island? Who knows? It could be either one of them. But meanwhile, we're still dealing with what is left of that northern eye wall, and coming on shore, as I mentioned, with winds gusting a couple of occasions at Frying Pan Shoals just off the coast at 100 and 102 miles per hour respectively. But to get the gust at Oak Island at 91, I thought was very respectable for what we were looking at on the radar and through here. All right, guys, again, I got a couple of spots I'm looking at off, if you will, out on the streets, away from the beach. I'm about 100 yards, by the way, from the beach, where at high tide at 8 o'clock, the water ran right on up. It ran right on up to the dunes. Okay, let's go back. I think we got some breaking information. Let's go back to Dr. Rick Knapp in the studio. Rick?
Okay, Jim, we have the new 11 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. The center of circulation has not yet made landfall. I would say that is an hour or less away. So it could be several minutes, could be an hour. In their advisory, they said in the next hour or two. Based on what I'm seeing on the radar, I think it'll be in an hour or less. But, in any event, the northern eye wall is on shore. The center of circulation is just offshore. So while we still have the strongest winds and the eye wall over water, the max winds are still at 85 miles an hour. It's moving a little more quickly now, north-northeast at 22 miles per hour. There's good news and bad news with that. It's a quicker in and out, but it also means it's not going to have time to weaken nearly as much. So the center of circulation, Jim, is just offshore. I would say within a half hour or so is my best guess of when the center of circulation is coming ashore. But Jim, you are about to get rocked with that northeastern eye wall. It is just a few miles to your south, probably the worst weather yet that you're going to see.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's what we've been waiting for here. And I've got a couple of spots, Dr. Knapp, I'm kind of looking at. Do we lose power in those spots on the streets here off the beach, about 100 yards? As I can't see really behind me. The hotel has a generator, to the best of my knowledge, so we may certainly lose some of the lights, in the building. But we'll see how, this round of gust that's coming in here can do. I actually had some pretty strong gusts probably about 15 minutes ago with just a little piece of this. Sometimes these things kind of unravel, if you will, and as they unravel coming ashore, they can spread out their wind field. So that's another thing we're going to have to seal. Get ready is what I'm saying. Again, Curry, Carolina, Wrightsville, up to Topsail as well. Get ready to potentially lose power here as we could see these winds gusting to over 74 miles an hour. And as we mentioned earlier, in Charlotte, which is where the Weather Service radar is, it's calm right now. So they're in at least a piece of the eye wall. There was fog reported from what I was being told in that area too. So that certainly is not what we're dealing with through here with the wind. We may get that eye come over us. And if it does, we're going to probably not see a lot of the wind that you're seeing right now or the rain. It could completely dry out. And then after it moves to the north, we may be on the drier side for a while until one of those western bands. And I mean, look at this thing from a radar perspective. This is such a different animal than what we had last night. So you've got east side action, north side action, west side action. And you may dry for a while when it goes northwest, but one of those bands may easily come around this. So we got a long way to go with this. A very, very dynamic hurricane coming ashore here and eventually interacting with a mid-latitude jet, which could easily keep these winds cranking up through Virginia, up through the Delmarva, up across the Jersey Shore into New York City, potentially gusting at hurricane force. And that's what some of the guidance is showing us. Just give me 1 second here. I'm going to try and put the stop on. I'm going to have to hold it. So this is the kind of weather that we're going to get, with this northern eye wall. It's not enough to knock me off my feet, but either way, it's certainly enough to cause some power outages. And we've had some reports of downed trees and power lines now at Carolina Beach. So not surprising as they were dealing with that eye wall just a little bit earlier on. All right, Jason, I have no idea what you're telling me. I'm just going to throw it back to the studio with Dr. Knapp. Oh, taking it to break. I can do that, buddy. Thank you very much. All right, guys, stick around. ECES coming ashore, as Dr. Knapp mentioned, maybe within the hour, likely within the hour. So, obviously a stronger hurricane has a lot of potential to do a lot more damage than what we're going to see through here. But still, power outages are power outages. Inland flood threats is obviously with us here. We've had some pretty incredible storm surge and some flooding as well associated with this on the South Carolina coast. And now we have so many millions of you that are still going to be in the path of a very, very unusual and energetic mid-latitude jet stream that is going to come up and inject its energy into the tropical system. So winds will still gust to hurricane force, potentially as far north as even New York City.
Hey, Jim,
and
given that it's night,
out for New England either, because we know we have elevation there.
Yeah, Jim, are you able to? Are you seeing any indication of lightning off to your east? Because outer bands appear to have some lightning in them at a pretty large distance from you. Are you seeing any lightning?
No, what I've seen has got a green flare to it, you know, more in the power surge variety. But, you know, I'm looking inland. Doc, I can't even look east.
Yeah. But what's happening?
I'm looking off to the northeast right now. I don't see any flashes at this point, but you know how they come and go. Yeah. And it's not rapid, continuous like an MCS or something in the plains. But
what's interesting, Jim,
I have not seen that. So the way I'm facing is actually toward the west and through here.
Yeah, it's often the case that the eye wall doesn't have very much lightning, but the first band outward from the eye wall can have a lot of lightning. So there's a lot of lightning in that band going up into Morehead City. So that band is really electrified, but this eye wall, not really. And that's typical of hurricanes. The outer bands usually have more lightning, but you are in the thick of it, Jim. And I think it's going to be a while because of the motion of the system. You're going to be on the eastern side for a while.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of one of the reasons that I picked this location, frankly, is because I knew it had a shot at either the eye or the eye wall, which is what we wanted to show you with this, whether it was a tropical storm or hurricane. You know, Wrightsville Beach is no stranger. Wilmington is no stranger to tropical systems. I've been mentioning this about 1.68 years, you know, a difference in time. You either get brushed or directly hit by this. But we have lost power as far as I can see out into the interior part of Wrightsville Beach. Again, ocean to my left, interior here to the beach and over toward the causeway. Power flashes have definitely been one in abundance here in the last 5 minutes with this wind and rain. So we're in this, and if we don't get into the eye, obviously it's not going to get calm because we're going to go from the northeast eye wall to the eastern eye wall, which is still coming in off the water because we're essentially right on the water. So we may not get a break here in Wrightsville Beach. Bummer certainly for us and the crew, because you always love when you're out here to at least get into the eye, and even people at home, you know, to get a break from the relentless pounding of rain and whatnot on their wind shields and outside their homes. And, you know, think about it. All this rain that's coming down is saturating the soils very, very quickly here. So it makes it much easier for the trees to come down. You don't need as much wind in through here. So Doc, what do you see in terms of obs? Or what kind? You know, I mentioned Oak Island 91. Have we seen anything close to that, or even of hurricane force since then? Wilmington at the airport, for example, even though it's a little inland there.
Yeah, they're gusting close to hurricane force at times at Wilmington at an inland location, but haven't seen a gust to hurricane force there. And there's a buoy offshore that gusted over 60, but that was before we got into the heart of the eye wall. So we'll keep looking for those obs. But Jim, I got to believe that we're not catching the strongest winds with these conventional observations. And I think, Jim, that the center is very close to Holden Beach, as you kind of called it.
Yeah, well, we'll see. You know, we'll see what the Hurricane Center calls as it moves northeast and accelerating now about 22 miles per hour. But yeah, we're definitely in a hurricane eye wall at this point, Doc. You know, I got the bracing down here with one leg in the back, one in the front, trying to parallel the wind to me and have it coming across me. Either way, the rain is a stinger. Even with any little bit of my face that's exposed, it really stings. It's kind of like getting sandblasted, especially at speeds like we have right in through here. So, heck of a storm here from what this thing looked like yesterday and what it looked like now and certainly has become. This is what happens when you take away the shear and you can allow this thing to really beef up, if you will, over the Gulf Stream. Holy smoke.
Jim has got to be seeing a slight change in the wind direction with time here, because as that eye wall gets closer, or the eye gets closer, it's going to pass just west of him. So as he stays in the eastern eye wall here, as the storm goes in this direction, I think as it goes by, then the winds are going to turn more southerly and eventually south-southwesterly. So Jim, get ready to be turning slightly more southerly as it goes by you. You'll know when the eye is just to your west.
Yeah, and what's interesting, because of where we are in the building, we may actually see a calm in the wind. You know, so we'll show you that, and then we'll move and show you where the winds are, because you know as well as I, wind around building is very, very tricky. The way it converges and accelerates and things like that, and obviously if you're blocked from the, you know, if you're on the north side of the building with the south wind, unless you're out where it's coming around the building and eddying, you're not going to get much wind at all. But right now, Doc, wind is not a problem here. We're getting absolutely hammered with this northern eye wall. And you were right. Worst part of this coming in, it's here. We've lost power in a lot of locations. Again, heading back toward the causeway, which is over my right shoulder here. The ocean here. Watching earlier the water come all the way up. And now who knows? You know, you get this kind of wind and the push, even as the tide's coming out, you can still push the water back in. So my thinking is it hasn't gone down all that much. Doc, take it away.
Yeah, Jim, looking at the Weather Service chat, you know, they're relaying that some law enforcement folks in like Carolina Beach are reporting that power is out. That's in the same stretch of coastline right in here. And again, you know, just by looking at the reflectivities, and I've looked at the velocities too, it is extremely close to being on the coastline. And it's, again, between the South Carolina, North Carolina border and the Cape here. And again, Holden Beach, as Jim mentioned, is one of the communities that's right in there. But again, it's moving off to the northeast very quickly, and so that's why the center is unlikely to pass over Jim, who's right here. And so he's going to be in the eastern eye wall. It's going to be a long couple of hours where you are in the eye wall, and the wind will go from, you know, it was more southeasterly. Now it'll turn, as the system goes right by you, it'll turn more southerly and then southwesterly, save for the effects of buildings in your immediate vicinity, Jim.
You know, it's Doc, even as you're speaking a little bit, it's sadly, unfortunately for me, it's coming a little bit more at my face right now than it was. So a little bit of that is starting, and then we see that, you know, as the eye wall transitions up and north to us. But I mean, this is just relentless rainfall coming in here. Any idea of what the rates are? I mean, this has got to be, you know, 2-3 inches an hour at what we're getting in this band. I mean, it's really, really intense. But the biggest deal here is, in the last 15 minutes, we have seen surges in the power, and now looking out again, just away from the beach, a couple hundred yards, where there is many, many homes. I do not see any power at this point. Maybe a lantern in somebody's window, you know, maybe someone has a generator, but all in all the power that I was looking at earlier, and I told you I would watch for you as this eye wall came in, is gone now. So you mentioned Dock, Carolina Beach. Curry Beach is another community down there. You know, Oak Island had 91 miles an hour. You know, we're not getting, I don't think we've had 91 here, but I don't know. Who knows? We've definitely gusted to hurricane force from what I can tell, because I've certainly done a few of these things. But either way you slice it, the kind of wind that we have right now and the kind of weather with this eye wall is going to cause power outages. We know that because we've seen it, and we know that because it's moving through and it's moving to the north. Doug, why don't you take the radar and actually let people that haven't gone through this yet know who's coming. I know up toward Topsail Beach will be another one of these areas. No stranger, of course, to hurricanes. 96, they took Bertha on the chin. Back to you.
Yeah, Topsail Beach and Surf City a little bit farther up the coast here. You aren't in the northeastern eye wall yet, but you will be before too much longer. And again, I think Jim is right in this area on the coast, you know, from Wilmington, and the reflectivities are really sky high there. I would bet that the rainfall rates are in the vicinity of 3 plus inches per hour in that location. And again, center of circulation is extremely close to making landfall officially, perhaps. Hurricane Center will probably be telling us that extremely soon. And the center of circulation is going to be moving north-northeast, and where Jim is, and this whole stretch of coastline, in the Wilmington area, is going to be in the eastern eye wall. You're not going to get the eye, so there's not going to be a break. But that does remind me to say, Jim, that people who are in the eye, do not go out in it with a fast-moving hurricane. The south side will be on you before you know it.
No, and it was interesting earlier because Shalom reported some fog with that too, so it gets really calm and really foggy outside for a second or two as this comes ashore, and then obviously we'll get the backside of it. Winds will shift pretty dramatically, and Doc, that's another thing too. Duration in this kind of wind and rain could enhance the power outage potential, couldn't it?
Well, yeah, the duration of winds is a big factor in power outages and damage, and the strength of the gusts. So you keep hammering the same locations here with gusts for a few hours, then you really rack up the damage, and the downed trees and the downed power lines and the flying debris becomes more and more of a problem. So there are some past hurricanes maybe that came in this way that maybe you didn't get as much wind damage as you might in this case because of the duration of how long you're going to get that eye wall. But Jim, the recent gust at Wilmington Airport inland there is 56, so you got to be gusting stronger than that. My goodness, look at that. He is really in the heart of it now.
I just had to get down. I just had to get down for a second. I mean, I've been standing and holding that position, kind of like holding a squat for 15 minutes. Not an easy thing to do. So I'm just going to take a knee here. We can still talk to you, obviously, and report on what's going on here. But yeah, this has got to be 80-ish, which almost knocked me right off my feet. So I just said, you know what, heck, it's time to just take a knee here and hopefully deal with some of these winds a little bit lower down toward the ground. But guys, if you're just joining in, again, we're dealing with this northeastern eye wall of Hurricane Isaias, and it has caused power outages literally from Carolina Beach, Curry Beach, now up here to Wrightsville Beach. Dr. Knapp mentioned Surf City, Topsail, next in line for this thing. It's come down a little bit, but not much. And if it is going to go more north than east, it is going to keep all of these beaches, Doc, right? In the wind duration, it's just going to change the direction a little bit, like you mentioned, more out of the south, as it would tend to be west of you at that point.
And this northeastern part of the hurricane, the northeastern eye wall, this is the part that had the strongest winds a couple or 3 hours ago when it was down here and the hurricane hunters were flying through it. When they went through that northeastern eye wall, that's when they got the flight level winds that showed that the surface wind estimates were accurate and that we had a hurricane. That was in the northeastern eye wall. Now this has got to be the strongest part of the hurricane right where Jim is, and it's onshore unobstructed flow. So you're going to have the strongest sustained winds anywhere on land, I think, pretty close to where you are right now, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you said we're even strong tropical storm at the airport, which is inland, they're a heck of a lot stronger here and more persistent. And unfortunately, even less wind than what I'm getting could easily cause power outages. So certainly prepare for that and hope for the best as this thing comes north. But kind of, if you haven't lost power, the fact that we're going to be in this for several hours, if the center goes to your west, as Dr. Knapp was mentioning, you get the southern part of the wind. It may not be as strong, but it may be just enough to kind of push us over the edge. So, Doc, because I haven't had a chance to look at my phone and my radar, you tell me, is there any way to anticipate how much more time we're in this like this?
Oh, my goodness, Jim. Well, I don't think it'll be this strong for the next couple of hours, but you will be in the eastern eye wall for the next couple of hours. So I think this is probably the worst of what you're going to experience, but it isn't going to get all that much better because, again, center of circulation is going to pass to your west. So here's Jim, and then here's downtown Wilmington, and then the center of circulation will pass on the other side of Wilmington. And so he's not going to get the eye out at Wrightsville Beach. It's going to go this direction, and intersect I-40 north of Wilmington. So he'll be in the eastern eye wall this whole time. Now, I think this is the strongest part, but this part is no picnic either. So, Jim, it's going to be a long haul. You're just going to be changing the direction in which you face, because it will come out more out of the south and then south-southwest. Wow, look at that. Really getting hit hard.
Well, thanks for the great news, Doc.
Yeah, I got to tell it like it is, Jim.
I say that in 8 quotes. No, I know, buddy. I know you're not. You know, the problem is, though, is that just keeps people in homes and whatnot into the winds. You know, we had a couple of ladies that came down earlier, and as the wind picked up, it's kind of interesting. They were just like, you know, this is really scary out here. We haven't experienced winds like this. They were on vacation, and they were talking about how, you know, just the sounds that the wind makes as it goes up in, you know, 40, 50, 60, 70 miles per hour. It's a different animal, and we certainly know it's we certainly know it's a different animal in terms of power outages, because the power of that wind, remember, is an exponential relationship with the speed. It's very, very strong. Oh. Doc, at least give me a landfall while I'm out here getting hammered.
Yes, Jim. Yeah, the National Hurricane Center has officially called landfall, and the center of circulation came ashore at 11:15 Eastern Daylight Time. And in fact, the landfall time is 11:10 p.m. Eastern Time. So the statement came out just a few minutes later. So the combination of the radar imagery and the surface obs indicate the eye of the hurricane made landfall in southern North Carolina around 11:10 p.m. Eastern near Ocean Isle Beach. So they called a point just a little bit west of Holden Beach. Maximum sustained winds at 85 miles an hour, Jim. So we've got landfall at the center in that same part of the coastline that we've been talking about, and now it's going to head to a path that takes it just west of Wilmington. You're going to be in the eastern eye wall. Yeah, and I think those 85-mile-an-hour max sustained winds are right offshore from you. You're getting the worst of it.
Yeah, I can attest to that. You know, Doc, I've done a few of these things, and maybe my nose has gotten bigger in age, I don't know, but I've never had one like push one of my nostrils closed. So I don't know why I had to share that with you. I just did. But that's how strong the wind is, if you can put a visual on that. Incredible wind coming out of this thing right now, out of the east. And like Dr. Knapp mentioned, we are right on the water, okay? Back in the day, I could probably throw a small stone into the ocean, but not anymore. Not too far from it at all. And with that, of course, there's nothing to stop that wind. That was the first little break that we got, and it was about a second. But it feels like the wind may just be coming down a notch. Maybe just a notch, but not much, Doc. Still a lot of power outage potential with this. And Dr. Knapp talked about this because, you know, it's easy to focus in on where it's coming ashore and, you know, who it's impacting in the now, but, you know, this is an incredible storm. When you look at the wind energy that's going to get injected into this, for places like Delaware and Maryland and New Jersey and New York and New England that may, you know, have not been tested, you know, in the last few years. We haven't had any really big nor'easters during the winter where we can sometimes get, you know, 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts. But now we're going to bring up this huge wind core to the tropical system that I think is going to catch a lot of people. Well, so much for the wind lightning.
No, you're absolutely right, Jim.
Catch a lot of people off guard.
Yeah, because of how strong it is as it's coming ashore, and because we're going to have that low-level jet with the trough coming in and fully leafed trees, a system that's 85 miles an hour when it's coming ashore, because it's stronger now and because it's moving so quickly over North Carolina, Virginia overnight, tomorrow night, it's going to still be a very potent tropical storm. So here's the official landfall once again at 11:10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time at Ocean Isle Beach. That's not far east of the South Carolina, North Carolina border. It's west and southwest of Wilmington, North Carolina. Max winds 85 miles per hour. Let's take a live look at Ocean Isle. This again is relatively calm, right? That's what you would expect if you're in the eye of a hurricane. Now, they're going to get the south side of this before too much longer. I'm pretty sure the winds are not gusting to 48 at the moment. At that location, you don't have the observations updating that quickly. But because this is moving so fast, you don't want to be outside and go venture out and see what it's like, because you're going to be getting the southern eye wall very quickly, and then the winds will pick up dramatically and things will start flying around again. So with a fast-moving hurricane, you got to stay inside. And this is where the center of circulation came ashore. So here's the South Carolina-North Carolina border, and then here's Wrightsville Beach right in here. And Ocean Isle Beach is there just west of Holden Beach. And a Category 1 hurricane, and you think, Category 1, well, that's not all that strong, but the pictures we're seeing and what Jim is going through shows you a Cat 1 hurricane is very, very dangerous, and Jim is taking every precaution he can to stay away from flying debris. Jim, how bad is it now compared to a few minutes ago?
Yeah, I mean, this has just been relentless now for about, what, 30 minutes we've been out here in the strongest part of this. If anything's changed, Doc, it's been the rain maybe has lightened up just a little bit, but that's it. It is still hammering with the wind. And now, even as I look toward the ocean, the power's out here, I think, at the hotel. The power is out here at the hotel as well. So Isaias having its way with southeastern North Carolina. Ocean Isle Beach, official landfall point, 11:10 this evening. We'll be right back.
Breaking now, some nasty pictures here. Multiple structures on fire now at Ocean Isle Beach in North Carolina as Hurricane Isaias made landfall. Some of these may have been sparked by downed power lines. Thousands of people are without power right now in North Carolina. Oh, unfortunately, just a nasty morning now as the storm makes its approach now on land and continuing to move north as eerily quiet and calm in Ocean Isle Beach, North Carolina, as the eye of the storm passed over with a pressure of 986 millibars. So again, weakening just as it made landfall, or strengthening, excuse me, just as it made landfall and moved onshore, the center of the storm. And active weather will continue probably for most of the day today into the nighttime hours tonight. Where the active weather is now, let's bring our storm specialist, Mark Elliott. And Mark, going to be a busy night and early morning, some very heavy rainfall and even the chance of seeing some spin-ups, aka some tornadoes. But luckily, there'll be quick movers and probably quick spin-ups, then they'll die down.
Yeah, and heartbreaking scenes out of Ocean Isle. Gosh, you got to really imagine it's tough to fight a fire right now with the winds the way they are. I'm going to show you what those winds are like in just a second. But first, if you're just tuning in, yes, we have had a landfall. We still have a Category 1 hurricane, Isaias, moving north-northeast now and picking up speed, going 22 miles per hour, still some 80-mile-per-hour winds. Now, that said, let's look at the radar picture and show you what those winds are like back down towards the south, where we are still following some strong wind gusts throughout the coastal communities of South Carolina and North Carolina. We're talking winds here gusting in North Myrtle Beach close to, say, 25 miles per hour. But there's winds that are up to 40 plus in Oak Island. Wilmington still gusting to 67 as of the last ob. And still with the onshore flow coming in towards the coastline, we're talking winds gusting 40 to 50 towards New Bern, towards Jacksonville. So some significant winds. That has done a number on the power outages. The power outages continue to go up. So you got to imagine, again, with more fires breaking out along that row of streets, with fires that would be very hard to fight right now with very strong winds, and the power outages continue to go up. So power lines could very well be responsible for that. We are still watching a severe weather threat. Want to show you what it's like across eastern North Carolina, all the way up through southeast Virginia, Norfolk, the Newport News area, all underneath a tornado watch until 6. One storm of note that is likely putting up one of those spins. This is Bertie County here in North Carolina. This is the motion of the raindrops. Look at that, red and green right next to each other. So that is our couplet holding its own over the last couple of scans. Usually these are pretty fleeting, but again, it is holding its own zone right now could come right up towards Windsor by about now, really, maybe the next couple of minutes. The Askewville at 1:30 all the way up towards Powersville by the time we get to 1:40 or so. So, Ray, that's just one more threat we're watching tonight.
Once drier air moves in, Matt, we're looking at improving conditions.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not terribly far away from the Atlantic Ocean, so it's still able to get some of the moisture from the Atlantic and then just kind of pull it all in. But it is weakening, which is good news. Those are the latest stats here from the Hurricane Center. Just had an update just at the top of the hour about 45 minutes ago, and it was at 85 miles per hour. Now the winds have dropped down to 70. So Isaias, once a hurricane, when it made landfall last night, late last night, south of Wilmington, is now officially back to tropical storm status. And it's going to be that way until the winds go below 39 miles per hour. And it's going to be a while before that happens, maybe not even until after midnight tonight. The winds now are at 70. There's the center of the storm crossing pretty much from North Carolina up into Virginia. So it apparently likes to go up I-95. That's where it's following. That's the center of the storm. All the rainfall is pretty much north of it. We're losing a lot of the rainfall out across Raleigh-Durham, so we're just about to shut off the rainfall there. The winds will definitely slacken up quite a bit over the next hour or two. The movement is really picking up speed and steam here north-northeast at 28 miles an hour. So it's about to go right by Richmond and then kind of take a beeline to Washington, get very close to Baltimore. Chelsea's been tracking all those tornadoes. We have to watch that pretty much on the right-hand side of the storm as the winds come off the smooth ocean and then run up against the friction of land. That's where you start to get those tornadoes and the water spouts. Everything starts just kind of churning around right there. We're going to deal with this pretty much all day long. Tornado warnings on and off, sporadic, all the way up potentially into Maine.
Can put your life in jeopardy. Look at this video. This is someone wading into the surf as Hurricane Isaias roared ashore in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Not a smart move. The storm caused severe flooding and damaging winds here, and fire and rescue crews had to save people trapped by floodwaters. And we have some new video in now. Take a look at this. This is damage left behind by Isaias in Oak Island, North Carolina. Water infiltrated homes on Oak Island in North Carolina as Isaias barreled on shore with devastating storm surge. You can see water damage on floors, garage doors mangled. Sure, a lot of those vehicles probably have water damage as well. And this is why buildings are on stilts at the coast. Look at this water, so high. This complex here on Caswell Beach, this is storm surge flooding, and it can be life-threatening. Moving water can sweep you off your feet.
Oh my, power's out.
Yep, power is out. Do you see that? That's the moment the power went out in Wilmington, North Carolina, as Isaias barreled through. Power outages are climbing in the Tar Heel state. More than 350,000 customers without power right now. And that number will increase as we see, unfortunately, the winds move north into the Mid-Atlantic and northeast. Here, bulk of the counties across the southern part, the southwest, where the landfall happened, but certainly up into the Triangle area, we had enough wind and rain to knock out power as well. Here's a look at when the system came ashore right near Ocean Isle Beach here in North Carolina. That eye wall, the most fierce winds in that eye wall, unfortunately, you took the brunt of it in Wrightsville Beach, in Wilmington, and that's why there are so many power outages. Trees down in Wilmington saw the winds gusting to 74 miles per hour for about a half hour straight, with very strong winds on either side of that. And so that's why there's so much cleanup to be done today. The system has been accelerating. It's now moving at 28 miles per hour. The fast movement is great, but the wind field is not weakening. We still have 70 mile per hour winds here, and the wind field is expanding as well. So as this tracks up through the north and east, expect a large area to feel those tropical storm force winds, and the risk is there for trees coming down, for power lines coming down, and for power to be out. A tornado watch is up until noon. This includes from Baltimore down right across eastern Virginia, and then over here into Maryland and across portions of Delaware and South Jersey for now. I do anticipate those tornado watches will be reissued throughout the day farther north as the system tracks north. And then we've got the tropical storm warnings, and that's in red. And those winds will be on the increase all the way up here into New England. Get ready for some winds 50, 60 miles
miles per hour by this evening, expecting widespread power outages because of it, Jordan.
Let's go ahead and bring in Dr. Postel, focusing on what's going on with Isaias now. And Dr. Postel, no doubt about it, there's a lot of flash flood warnings, and we're still concerned about that threat for some of these tornadoes to spin up.
Yeah, the wind, the rain, and the tornadoes. Isaias on the latest advisory, the whole thing is moving north-northeast at 35 miles per hour. Let's go to the map. I got only a short bit of time to talk about this, but there is the center circulation. That will be updated. I believe it's a little bit farther north than that, but it is moving along a path like that and along and to the right of that track. If you can put my screenwriter in, that would be great. Along and to the right, max 48. Along and to the right, that is where the tornado threat is going to be today. And we'll have to watch that very, very carefully because right now there are some angry-looking supercells moving northward through New Jersey. Though no tornado warnings right this moment, I expect we will see that tornado threat continue during the afternoon. Right now, we are watching wind gusts still in Atlantic City, 60 miles per hour. It does appear that the strongest winds right now are actually in areas where it's not raining very hard. That is not uncommon. But once the heavy rain moves through, your winds may actually pick up. But speaking of heavy rain, it is along this arc right in here. This is where the tornado threat is. And actually, we just got a new tornado warning. I got to zoom over to that right now because we do have a tornado warning for Montgomery County in Pennsylvania. These storms are all moving very, very quickly and over 60 miles per hour. So if you live in Montgomery County, Belglade, Lower Salford, or any one of those towns in between, take shelter now. You will not see these things move through. They're moving so fast. It's raining so hard. This is a very dangerous day all across the region, and we've got a tornado watch out that goes until 4 o'clock Eastern time. I would not be surprised in locations in southern New England and New York State to see another tornado watch issued for later on today. We'll have all the latest on Isaias with live coverage in the field coming right up after the break.
Some water rise and some of the low-lying areas throughout New York City, including here in Brooklyn and also up towards lower Manhattan and up the East and West Rivers. So we got to watch that very closely. Let's get the latest on what we know with Tropical Storm Isaias right now. There have been 2 more deaths linked to the storm have just been confirmed, bringing the U.S. death toll now to 3, unfortunately, and we're hopeful that no more deaths are reported, but that may change, especially given the seriousness of this storm. We now know that 1 person was killed in Mechanicsburg, Maryland this morning when a tree fell on a car. Heartbreaking situation there, and 2 people were killed when a tornado hit a mobile home park early this morning in Bergen County, North Carolina. There are now more than 31 million people who are under tornado watches, and we have seen an outbreak, guys, with tornadoes with this storm. And the governor of New Jersey says public safety is the state's main concern right now, and it's ready to respond wherever needed. So that is the latest here on what we know with Tropical Storm Isaias. Of course, it's an ongoing situation impacting everyone from Florida, which was the case over the weekend, now all the way into New York and New England. Boston, you're going to get effects, and we're going to see this all the way into northern New England. There comes one of the rain bands, and notice how it just dips visibility here fairly quickly over the course of the city. So things change very quickly. A travel advisory is in effect here. And really quickly, before we head back in studio with Jackie, I'm going to see if Matt Saber can fluctuate almost a 180. Let's go this way. There's a lot of things like this, like tents and construction sites and tents. Those are the types of things we got to watch out for. Of course, outdoor dining has been a big thing, and the city has mandated that all outdoor seating has been brought in. So hopefully business owners responded well. It's going to be tough getting food out tonight, and ideally, it's going to be one of those nights to cook at home if you don't lose power. But we are monitoring power outages too. So this is a really, fluid, ever-changing situation. So far, we're doing okay right now in New York City, but the worst has yet to arrive, Jackie, and that's something we got to watch for very closely, of course, with very heavy rain, but I think it's going to be the wind that's really going to get us here and the potential for more tornadoes.
Exactly. In fact, we just got a wind gust report at both LaGuardia and JFK of 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So those strong, damaging winds, Chris, are certainly arriving. And, don't be fooled because this is coming in behind where some of the heaviest of rain has been. So the rain and the flash flood coming comes first, and then the strongest of winds have been kind of pushed in on the backside of all of this. So kind of the opposite of what happened yesterday with Tropical Storm Isaias. It's hard to believe it has traveled this far, and we're still talking about 70-mile-per-hour maximum sustained winds. And a lot of that has to do with some of the energy coming in with the jet from our non-tropical system that's up into Canada right now, but also the forward speed. This thing is ripping. 40 miles per hour. Most tropical systems only travel about 13 miles per hour. So those impacts are coming in a little bit sooner than expected across parts of the Northeast for today. You know, it's a small window of opportunity, maybe a 6-hour window of opportunity where things are really going to get rough for a while, and then we're going to be done with this. And tomorrow we're talking about a sunny day at the beach. Still a little gusty and still some ocean issues or beach issues. But other than that, we are going to be doing a little bit better as a result. So this is going to continue to move very quickly and bring very heavy rainfall with it. This shows you all the flash flood warnings that are in effect right now, including the Philadelphia area to the west of there. Some high water rescues are taking place. We've had a number of tornadoes today, more than 100 tornado warnings already with Isaias. Knock on wood, no warnings right now, but conditions are favorable over the next couple of hours, and I think becoming increasingly favorable for more tornadoes to develop. So we have a brand new tornado watch. This just in near the top of the hour that includes you in Boston out towards the Cape, Providence, Hartford, and Albany. This until 9 o'clock tonight. So that is hours to go with that. And then south of there, we have the tornado watch that was issued earlier, and that will continue until 4 o'clock, including you in New York City and stretching down towards Philadelphia. So we are keeping an eye on storms that are developing into the new watch area to the west of Springfield, and those little individual storms will be the ones that we worry about for potential for them to begin to rotate. Now, power has been a big problem. The numbers have been going up exponentially all day long, and it was literally just 2 hours ago that we were around 800,000, and now we're up to over 1 million people without power. Look at the big concentration of them here into parts of New Jersey. And there you can see, wow, we're up even more from just before the top of the hour, up to 1.5 million people.
We have a new advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Now, I want to make it clear, we still have tropical storm warnings up. It's just that the storm itself is not a tropical storm anymore. This is now a post-tropical cyclone, Isaias. Max winds are still 45 miles per hour. And there's just been a slight change to the tropical storm warnings. The tropical storm warning discontinued south of the Merrimack River in Massachusetts, but you still have a tropical storm warning in effect from the Merrimack River in Massachusetts up to Stonington, Maine. So we still have tropical storm warnings in effect in this vicinity here. So it's not over, folks. It's just that it doesn't have the characteristics of a tropical storm anymore. Moving north-northeast at 38 miles per hour, and it's about 45 miles east-southeast of Montreal. So they're getting the west side of it, getting some pretty strong wind and getting some heavy rain as well. But it's still along the coast here that we're still getting those winds near 45 miles an hour and gusty winds interior portions of Maine. So the hazards still exist. There are still reports occasionally over the last hour or two of trees coming down in places like New Hampshire and Maine. So it is imperative that you continue to take this just as seriously as you have been in the areas where you're still getting the bad weather. So this will be the last advisory from the Hurricane Center, that has, the previous one was the last advisory we're going to have as tropical storm Isaias, but we're going to continue to, deal with the tropical storm conditions and the heavy rainfall. But it's going to be only a little while longer that we have that problem.